Welcome to the Appropriations Committee. My name is Rob Clements. I'm from Elmwood. I represent Legislative District 2, which is Cass County and eastern Lancaster County. I serve as chair of this committee. We will start off by having members do self-introductions, starting with my right.
Board Lippincott, District 34.
Tony Vargas, District 7.
Anna Wishart, District 27, West Lincoln in Lancaster County.
Mike McDowell, LD5, South Omaha.
Myron Dorn, District 30.
We may have senators that are coming and going with other obligations with bills. So that'll have no reflection on our proceedings today. Assisting the committee today is Tamara Hunt, our committee clerk. To my left is our fiscal analyst, Suzanne Holden. And our pages today are Malcolm from Omaha, UNL student, and Kate from Kansas, UNL student. At each entrance, you'll find green testifier sheets. If you are planning on testifying today, please fill out a green testifier sheet and hand it to the committee clerk when you come up to testify. If you will not be testifying but want to go on record as having a position on a bill being heard today, there are white sign-in sheets at each entrance where you may leave your name and other pertinent information. These sign-in sheets will become exhibits in the permanent record after today's hearing. To better facilitate today's proceeding, I ask that you abide by the following procedures. Please silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Move to the front chairs when you're ready to testify. The order of testimony will be introducer, proponents, neutral, and closing regarding bills. When we hear testimony regarding agencies, we will first hear from a representative of the agency. Then we will hear testimony from anyone who wishes to speak on the agency's budget request. When you come to testify, spell your first and last name for the record before you testify. Be concise. We request that you limit your testimony to 5 minutes or less. Written materials may be distributed to the committee as exhibits only while testimony is being offered. Hand them to the page for distribution when you come up to testify. If you have written testimony but do not have 12 copies, please raise your hand now so the page can make copies for you. Now we will begin today's hearing with Agency 48, Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Clements, members of the committee. My name is Mike Baumgartner, M-I-K-E-B-A-U-M-G-A-R-T-N-E-R. I'm the Executive Director of the Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education. The Commission appreciates and supports the Appropriations Committee's preliminary appropriations for our agency operations and most grant programs, but asks that you reconsider the flat general fund appropriation included in the preliminary report, the Nebraska Opportunity Grant Program. For those of you unfamiliar with the Nebraska Opportunity Grant, it is the state's need-based student aid program for Nebraska undergraduates. It's existed since 2003, and since 2003, it has been funded from a combination of lottery funds and general funds. Student eligibility is based on expected family contribution, which is calculated from information provided on the free application for federal student aid and is the basis for determining eligibility for federal Pell Grants and other federal Title IV aid, as well as the Nebraska Opportunity Grant and most institutional need-based aid. The NOG program extends eligibility to students with an EFC of up to 110% of the maximum EFC for Pell eligibility, which means that middle-income students just above the Pell cutoff can receive NOG awards. The NOG program is decentralized. The Coordinating Commission determines the amount of NOG funds each eligible college or university receives based on a statutory formula, but the colleges and universities determine which of their eligible students receive awards. The Commission reviews and audits the list of eligible students to ensure compliance with statutory and regulatory requirements. The maximum award a student may receive is 1/2 of tuition and mandatory fees charged a full-time Nebraska resident undergraduate student at UNL from the preceding year. This year, the maximum award is $4,814, though most awards are far less than that because the colleges and universities must ration the awards. In fact, the average award for FY22 was $1,721. And even at that amount, our institutions were able to provide aid to only 13,188 students of the 28,883 eligible. So less than half of eligible students are receiving awards. The NOG program is among the smallest need-based programs in the country in terms of aid per undergraduate student and as a percentage of higher education appropriations. Nebraska needs every student and every adult prepared for the workforce. The state educational attainment goal that 70% of Nebraskans aged 25 to 34 will have a degree, certificate, or credential with value in the workplace by 2030 is based on the needs of Nebraska's economy. College affordability is an intrinsic part of achieving our attainment and workforce readiness goals. The gap between college-going rates of low-income and non-low-income high school graduates is stubbornly high, a consistent 20 to 22% over the past decade, 52% to 74%. Not surprisingly, the 150% graduation rates also differ considerably and predictably between Pell Grant recipients and non-recipients. Fewer low-income Nebraskans pursue post-secondary education, and fewer completing post-secondary education hinders our ability to meet our workforce needs. While we heartily support the Nebraska Career Scholarship Program and its increases, it doesn't supplant the need for the Nebraska Opportunity Grant. Need-based aid matters for both persuading low-income students that college is a possibility and for keeping them enrolled through graduation. The Coordinating Commission has long requested incremental increases in NOG funding, and with the legislature's and governor's support, appropriations have increased recently, primarily from lottery growth, but also with a very welcome $1 million increase in general funds beginning in FY21. Unfortunately, as I noted earlier, less than half of NOG eligible students received a grant last year. For the 23-25 biennium, the Commission has requested a $2 million increase from general funds for FY24 and an additional $1 million increase from general funds for FY25. Based on FY22's average award of $1,721, and I'm not saying that's an ideal award, I'm just saying that was the average, we could serve 1,744 additional students with the $3 million. Based on FY22 eligible students, that would get us up to serving over 50% of eligible students. Is 50% coverage sufficient? I do not believe so, but it does keep chipping away at meeting student needs. While I'm with you, I also need to raise the issue of lottery funds. LB 705, as introduced, would maintain NOG's share of lottery funds for education at 62%, and the stability that source has provided since 2003 is very important to the health of the program. We much appreciate recent increases in appropriations from the Nebraska Opportunity Grant Fund to spend down a fund balance, but the fund balance and future cash flows from the lottery cannot support the current level of spending beyond about FY27. We are currently spending $16.35 million from NOG funds a year while bringing in about $13 million. I'll bring that to your attention as a committee now, as I did in 2021, so that we can begin to plan together how to replace that excess balance once it disappears without making program cuts in the future. Thank you for your time. I would be happy to respond to any questions you might have concerning our request for the Nebraska Opportunity Grant, or for any questions you have about our operations, other grant programs, or anything related to our budget.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Armendariz.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks for being here today. Can you tell me what percentage of students that received the Opportunity Grant graduate with a four-year degree?
It is generally the same as for Pell Grant students. And we haven't done that analysis for a couple of years, but it is about half of the students ultimately.
About half the students that finish?
Will receive it it depends on the campus they're going to. So really it's very similar to the completion rates of all students. So between 40 and 60% and 150% of the time.
So there's no difference between the grant students and the ones that don't receive
Well,
grants?
they're close to Pell Grant students. So they're lower than non-Pell Grant.
Okay.
So it's lower than, I will get you the information on graduation rates. We're putting that out in our progress report. That's a statutory report we put out every year in March. Our commission's going to act on it next week, but you can see the graduation rates. There is usually a 10 to 20% difference between Pell Grant recipients and non-Pell Grant recipients.
Okay.
So low-income students generally
Tend to not finish as
tend
much.
not to finish as often, and part of that is lack of funds.
So just to summarize where I'm trying to get the point for me, and I think most Americans, the frustration with college debt is the point is to graduate with a degree so that you can actually pay back that debt. You can oftentimes be in worst case if you start and don't finish
Absolutely.
and have borrowed money. So that it's very important to me to see how many are borrowing money and finishing, as opposed to not borrowing any money and maybe not going at all.
Well, we don't have information on borrowers here. There is a federal measure that can look at that. One of the reasons students borrow is because there's not enough need-based aid available. That makes them work more hours, that slows them down, makes them borrow more, makes them more likely to drop out. That's why it's,
Or tuition rates are really high.
well, tuition rates are actually in Nebraska relatively good compared to the rest of the nation. Are they too high? Yeah, from students and families' perspective. Yeah, that's also a function of.
And I'm
how
not
much the
picking on
state puts
Nebraska. In general, nationwide.
Yeah, they are.
Some might
But I-
argue that might be cost prohibitive as well.
It is, and a lot of that is dependent on the amount of funding that institutions receive to maintain their operations. And you'll be hearing from our institutions about that
Okay.
after me.
Thanks for answering my question.
Other questions? Senator Vargas?
Thank you for being here, and thank you for the coordinating commission's work. The reports that you put out are extremely informative, and I've mentioned that to my colleagues because it's, when we talk about all the data we're trying to look for, it is very valuable. I was wondering if you had any updated information. I know you say in this that Nebraska ranked 35th in the country from 2019 to 20 in the amount of state provided need-based financial aid per student, which puts us, I mean, that's really terrible. And I don't know if you have any information on how we fared in the last, 2-3 years, if there's any more data points to show us getting better or getting worse due to inflation.
We are getting slightly better because we are putting more than $1 million and then an additional $3 million over time. So we are about 30th in the last year. So we have improved there with the money. I would still say 30th is not that great, but what I would say more so is that we don't even cover half of the eligible students in the award amount is not enough. So,
And I think this is a follow-up question. What have been has there been an increase, sort of steady or decrease in the number of students that are eligible for non-grants?
the number of eligibles has declined quite a bit from the last recession because, as you recall, enrollment patterns at the time, community colleges saw a very large increase 2008, 2010, 2012. Many of those students were Pell eligible students because they were adults going back to work. So there is a decline in eligible students over time, but I think much of that is a function of those adults that were going back to school at that point, and also the decline caused by COVID. Even though Nebraska institutions have held out really well compared to others, there's still been some declines, some small declines, and that affects the number of students too. But it's still almost 30,000 students that are eligible for this every year, and less than half of them get the award.
That's the concern. Even though we have 1,700 average grant, that's 1,700 of those that received the grant.
Right.
That means that there's half that are not getting anything whatsoever for need-based aid.
Yes.
Appreciate you coming.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone here wanting to testify regarding Agency 48 Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education? That would be proponent, opponent, neutral. Seeing none, that concludes Agency 48. We'll open the hearing for Agency 50, Nebraska State Colleges. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Paul Turman, that's spelled Paulturman. I'm the Chancellor of the Nebraska State College System. I appreciate the opportunity to come and visit with you today about the state colleges in our system, our three institutions, Chadron, Peru, and Wayne State College. I'll be our sole presenter for the system. I plan to focus my testimony on 3 primary areas. First, to talk about and demonstrate how the investment that the state colleges, that you provide the state colleges, make a strong return on the investment for Nebraska. Efficiencies in the state colleges that ensure access and affordability for the students that we serve. And then lastly, talk through our core need and special initiatives request. As I started my presentation, they passed around an infographic, and I'll use that primarily to drive the testimony that I have across those 3 areas. And really what you see on the first page of that is in all green, talks about 2 different things. Certainly the return on investment that the state of Nebraska has been getting for continuing to make investments into the state colleges. We have a strategic plan that's driven by 4 outcomes, and those outcomes are measured by 20 different performance indicators. This last year, 15 of those performance indicators were in the green, showing that we're making the type of progress that we look to make to meet the benchmarks that we set for 2025. I want to highlight just simply 5 of those to draw your attention. This last year, we continue to make progress in our enrollment. We were at 8,855 students. We are seeking to get to 9,000 students by 2025, but we've seen 5 straight years of enrollment growth across our 3 institutions. We also are seeing solid progress in our overall retention. 69% of our students retained from first year to second year, and that's actually about 9% higher than the national average for open enrollment institutions that are similar to ours. Our goal is to get to 72% over the next remaining 2 years. We are also seeing increases in the number of individuals and students that we have that are going and engaged in experiential learning opportunities. So more internships, more cooperative educational experiences, more practicum, more clinical experiences that are then allowing those students to get connected to the business and industries that we're expecting them to ultimately go and then work for once they're done. We're also seeing that at 85% of our students, when we match our data against the Department of Labor, if you're in one of those H3 positions or a degree program, high need, high demand, high wage, 85% of those students are right now employed 1 year after graduation once they finish at one of our 3 state colleges. And we look to try to improve that to 90%. Things like the Career Scholarship program certainly has been an influential factor in helping us move the dial on a number of these indicators. I'd end with the fact that we have grown our total number of graduates. This last year was the most graduates we've ever produced in our graduate and undergraduate programs, 1,898. We have a goal of getting to 2,000 and working in conjunction with the other higher education systems to grow educational attainment to get us to that 70%, similar to what you saw in LR 335 last year, that as a state, degree attainment at all levels, apprenticeships, associate degrees, credentials, bachelor's, professional, all of those are needed to grow and expand if we're going to move the state's economy in the direction that we want. I'll draw your attention to the lower half of the infographic, which attempts to emphasize, I think, what are the efficiency indicators that we are continuing to try to look at within the state colleges. A question came up about overall student debt. I'm pleased to note that the students who graduate from our institutions, the federal debt that they normally experience, the median average is about $20,372. That's about 5.6 lower than peer institutions that we compare ourselves against. Those are set by the Coordinating Commission. Dr. Baumgardner worked with us 2 years ago to identify those institutions around the region who are much like us, same enrollments, same degree programs, same student populations. And so those are the comparisons you'll see. We're slightly lower, but we're also 27.2% lower than the national average as it comes to student debt at the end of graduation. Our adjunct faculty pay, until we made an adjustment this year to increase that slightly to $1,000 a credit hour, was about 40% or 48% lower than our comparative institutions just here in Nebraska. And by doing that, it actually got us a little bit closer to 26%. When we look at overall instructional costs, so a new assistant professor coming into our system, when you compare that against our peers, we're about 10% lower. We're 19% lower when you can compare against public institutions in the upper Midwest area here in the Midwest region. Administrative salaries are lower, 19%, and then 35% when you compare against those same types of institutions. The most important indicator that I think you all should look at, which drives a lot of the things that we do in the state colleges, is the notion that how much does it cost to produce a degree? So all dollars in, the dollars that you provide for us as investments, as well as the tuition and the fee revenue that we collect from students. And are we able to generate degrees at a much lower level than our peer institutions? And then when you compare that to other public institutions, $76,347 was the number for us last year to produce those 1,800, almost 1,900 graduates. And that's rightly about 13.7% lower than our peers, the northern states, the Dakota states, the Minot states that we compare ourselves against. As I ask you to maybe flip the page, I'll highlight just a couple of different factors before I talk very quickly about the core need request. I think the most important thing is that everyone is faced with a significant number of fixed costs that drive the cost of education, the cost that we have to incur to make sure that the academic programs that we have are in very sound position. This last year, we actually had over the last 2 years, we had two projects, one at Wayne, one at Peru State College, construction projects that initial estimates were just under $40 million. And by the time we went to bid here over the last couple of months, we've seen a 30% increase in the cost to about $11.1 million. Our insurance rates have gone up dramatically over the last 2 years, 87% increase in our cyber, our property, as well as our liability insurance. Our utility costs have continued to go up at 23%, about a $500,000 expenditure higher than we had anticipated a year ago. And the same thing, just simple looking at maybe student travel, an increase of about 25%. So across the board, what we're seeing is dramatic increases in the things that are fixed costs that we really don't have many decisions. We can't not insure our buildings. We cannot provide cyber insurance to protect the data that we have. And so we're forced to make other decisions to determine where it is that we want to make those cuts. Also note the last 2 years, the state colleges held tuition at 0%, simply because we knew that a lot of the families and the students that we serve were having a difficult time of coming up with the resources that they needed to be able to continue on to pursue and get that 4-year degree that they need. When we look at what the overall cost to generate the type of revenue that's needed to cover these fixed costs, a 1% tuition increase generates about $311,000 for our institutions based on the credit hours that we delivered this year. So we compare that against what we set forth as our budget, as well as what the governor's recommendation, and then try to evaluate that against what your preliminary recommendations are. When you look at our core need request, there are 7 things there. I want to just talk about 3 in particular, and I think you can see how those also align to the other areas as well. Salary related benefits. We see a projected increase of about $6.9 million. The DAS recommendation that we followed said, set your salary increases at 5%. We went to negotiations with our 3 unions that represent 77% of our employees. And actually their initial request went much higher, 11, 12. And we were able to get that down just below that 5%, along with some other supplemental increases. So that's a very accurate reflection of what we will pay our employees next year based on those negotiations. I also like to highlight on insurance. While I note that number up at the top, 87% increase, over the last 5 years, we've seen an increase of 213% in insurance costs. Not only are the costs going up, what we get for that coverage has actually gone down significantly. And I'll talk about that when I emphasize the insurance trust element. That's a special need request. But what we're seeing is something that was about $500,000 annually for our institutions when I first arrived here in Nebraska has grown to a $1.5 million expenditure each year. And the market for the next 2 years does not look any better. I'll end on at least the core needs with the adjunct faculty rates. I talked on that previous page that we have grown from $850 a credit hour, which is equated to roughly about $15 an hour. Gotten that up to at least $1,000 so that we at least are paying our adjuncts, people who are master's trained, meeting the HLC requirements, that they're making at least $18 an hour. When we compare that against the rest of the state, other institutions, they're more in that $12.50 range. And that would be more in line with about 23. The only alternative, if we're not able to find enough adjuncts to cover the classes that we have a goal of making sure that about 30% of our courses are delivered by adjuncts, the remaining 70% by our full-time faculty. If we can't find an adjunct, it means we have to ask our full-time faculty to teach more when they're already doing a 4-4, maybe a 5-5 load. And in their negotiated agreement, they get 2% of their annual salary for every credit hour they deliver, which puts that cost closer to about $1,450. And so there's a big, almost $800,000 differential when we're not able to provide the support for those adjunct rates that we have. So our core need request, you can see that $311,000 per 1% tuition. The differential ends up being still a gap about 16% in tuition that we have to make a hard decision about where do we want to approach that as I make recommendations to our board. 2 state aid programs. This legislature, this committee for the last 3 years has been very supportive of the career scholarships. And I would say, as I said before, big impact on getting more students into the degree programs that you desperately need to drive the workforce. And getting that last investment of the $1 million will help us continue on that path. We'd also requested some funding for the RHOP and the Feast Scholarship Program. If you know about that initiative, essentially something that's been around, a great partnership with UNMC, our 3 state colleges for more than 30 years now. It started out with basically about 28 students in that program, costing about $28,000 a year when we give the total tuition waivers for it. Now that we have about 200 students and alternates in that program, it's costing our institutions about $1.6 million annually. And our goal was how do we come together as a partnership with the state that the state maybe would cover half of those costs. Rural health is important. It's critical to serve the counties that we represent. But at the same time, I don't think you had anticipated that over time that the families and the students that we serve would be the ones who have to make up that cost to get us to that $1.6 million. The one-time funding on the insurance trust, Congressman Flood last year was helpful in helping us get LB 1206 that the legislature passed, which created a mechanism for us to have a insurance trust mechanisms very similar to the university system. And what we're seeking here is dollars to be able to serve as an initial kind of placeholder to help kind of buy down deductibles that we see in our insurance pools. So I'll give you a quick example of property insurance. 4 years ago when I first arrived here, we were involved in the Midwest Higher Education Compact, along with about 120 other institutions in the 16 states that it serves. Slowly, the number of institutions backed out of that program, so the risk stopped being shared across a bigger pool. We were down to about 16, and this year they actually voted to eliminate that pool. So now we're out on our own in the market trying to compete for property insurance. We used to have a deductible rate that was at $50,000. If a storm came through Peru and we had all of our buildings ruined by hail on our roofs, we paid a deductible of $50,000. They've changed that now that it's at actually a $2.5 million deductible for one building, and it's $10 million for an entire event. So the insurance trust is designed as a mechanism to help provide some cushion in the event that we find those events in a place where our institutions can offset it for a few years to be able to cover it. I'll end with the capital projects. We have continued to invest in a variety of energy efficient initiatives. Governor Ricketts 2 years ago proposed $5.4 million to allow us to convert the remaining capital buildings at Peru State College to geothermal HVAC. And what we saw was when we went out to market for that, actually the bids came back in double. And so we've now come back with an additional request of about 6.1 to make up that difference so that at the end of the day, we're able to make sure that what we initially sought to do 2 years ago, you've already recommended the 2.1 to make that whole for that 3 years worth of investment. But we're asking to make sure that we have the capacity to find ways long-term to bring our overall costs down. I think on behalf of the Board of Trustees, our presidents, the students that we serve, I desperately want to thank you personally for the investment that the legislature and this state continues to make in the state college system. They have done a great job of making sure that it's meeting the workforce needs of the state and producing the degree programs that are necessary. I think our core need requests are driven by kind of the short-term needs that we see over the course of the biennium. I think we also have scholarship programs, an insurance trust, as well as geothermal investments are things that are seen as long-term. How do we continue to find ways now to make an investment to change that course over the time? Oftentimes I hear this notion that higher education is criticized because it doesn't operate a lot of times as a business. But I think it's important to know that when businesses are going to grow and expand, investment is critical to help them be very successful. As the state colleges continue to grow, I ask that you continue to make those ongoing investments to help the commitment to the positive impact that we're making for the students that we serve and the workforce and economic impact that we do. As the state's only designated open enrollment institutions, we are very committed to providing affordable, high quality and accessible education. And I really do thank you for your time today, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Other questions from the committee? Senator McDonald.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your hard work. Just a clarification on the trust, the insurance trust. Are you asking for 1.5? Are you asking for 1.5 per year for a total of 3 million?
It's a very good question, and I think there certainly was some confusion in the nature of how the request came forward. We initially, a year ago, when we put that insurance trust legislation, we thought the 1.5 certainly was going to provide the coverage that we needed. And it denotes a 1.5 and then a 1.5 for the second year, a total of 3 million. And that certainly is what we talked with the governor's budget office about, that a $3 million pool would at least cover those kind of one instant types of events that we might have. And that includes hail, wind, and tornado events on our 3 campuses. So the initial request, yes, was the 1.5, but our conversation directly with the governor and his staff was to try to grow that, which is why I think it was included as a recommendation that way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there other testifiers regarding Agency 50 Nebraska State Colleges? Well, seeing none, I have position comments. I have one proponent comment, no opponents, no neutral. That will conclude Agency 50. We'll open a hearing for Agency 51, the University of Nebraska. And I would like to also point out, we hear from official testifiers first. So I'm going to invite System President Carter, then Regent Claire, then Student Regent Kent, Student Regent Sadi, Chamber President Sloan, and Farm Bureau President McArgue in that order. After that, we will take other testifiers. Welcome and thank you for coming, Mr. President Carter.
Chairman Clements, it's great to be with everybody today. Members of the Appropriations Committee, good afternoon. My name is Ted Carter, TED-CARTER, and I am the president of the University of Nebraska System. Thank you for the opportunity to be with all of you. I'd like to spend a few minutes walking you through the university's budget request and the steps we have taken to manage our finances. Afterwards, I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. So this is an exciting time to be serving in higher education. Most days, I pinch myself that I get to be part of the university with such a long tradition of improving the lives of Nebraskans and creating economic growth in every corner of the state. This is also a period of significant and rapid change in our education industry. As all of you know, I was a naval officer in my previous life, so allow me to use a Navy analogy. When I think about the challenges that we at the University of Nebraska are facing today, along with many of the other higher education peers across the country, headwinds is the word that comes to mind. Now, as I look across and I see Senator Lippincott sitting across from me, I might be wiser to use an Air Force term or maybe even a commercial airline term and say we have turbulence ahead. Either way, the challenges are real. 40-year high inflation is squeezing our operations, just as it is for all Nebraska families and businesses. It costs more for us to keep the lights on, make repairs to our buildings, and it's putting pressure on our wages as we try to recruit and retain the very best faculty and staff to our campuses. And based on what we've heard from the Federal Reserve Chairman Powell, it may be some time before inflation comes back down. At the same time, new revenues to the university are limited. While our budget has many components, there are only 2 sources of revenue that can fund our day-to-day activities: tuition and state appropriations. Other elements of our budget that you may read about, like private gifts or funds in Husker athletics, do wonderful things for our students in the state, but they are not available to support our general operations. When it comes to tuition revenue, enrollment, unfortunately, is not where we or I want it to be. Of course, this is not only a budget issue, but more importantly, it's about meeting Nebraska's workforce needs. The chancellors are working hard to reverse the declines we've experienced in the past few years, and we view this as an all-hands-on-deck effort. But the demographic reality is that declining birth rates in Nebraska and around the country mean we will have a smaller and smaller pool of prospective students from which to recruit. Growth is our goal, but we will almost certainly need to have a conversation about what right looks like when it comes to enrollment over the long term at the University of Nebraska. State funding, meanwhile, has historically not kept pace with inflation. And I want to be very clear. I'm not here, and we will not ask the state to compensate for our enrollment declines. And we will not ask the state for more dollars than we absolutely think we need to operate. The university has not always taken this approach. Some may suggest I should have inflated our request in hopes that you would settle somewhere in the middle. That is not my style, and it's not how I've operated since the day I've been in this chair. When I submit a request to you as stewards of the taxpayers' money, I want you to know it's because I have studied the numbers carefully, and I believe it's exactly what we need and not a penny more. As long as I am in this chair, I have promised Governor Pillen and Chairman Clements we will be responsible partners when it comes to our budget requests. The request before you today is for a 3% funding increase each of the next 2 years. Represents what we determined with the support of our Board of Regents to be a modest and prudent request. It would cover some, but not all, of our core operating expenses, including the 3% salary increases that we just negotiated with our faculty bargaining units, that's UNK and UNO, and increases for other faculty and staff to help us compete for talent. It would allow for us to keep tuition affordable for students and families and continue to invest in financial aid. Even if funded in full, our request would require us to make reductions. But we're willing to look inward to tighten our belts in order to be good partners to our elected leaders who we know are working very hard to balance the state's many priorities. We are fortunate in Nebraska that the state has historically recognized the importance of an affordable, accessible, high-quality public university, and we are grateful for that partnership. By providing a stable base of support, you have helped us deliver to Nebraskans a combination of value and quality that I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anywhere else. Governor Pillen has continued this trend of stability, and we are thankful for his budget, which recognizes the value of the University of Nebraska. We are particularly appreciative of the governor's support for the UNK-UNMC Rural Health Facility in Kearney, which we believe will be a transformative project for the quality of life and workforce in rural Nebraska. And we thank the governor for continuing the state's investment in the Nebraska Career Scholarships. We'll expand opportunities for students to pursue degrees in high-demand fields in our state. In short, the governor's recommendation puts us in a very good position leading up to our conversation with you today. Now, our request was carefully considered, balancing the basic needs of the university with our commitment to being good partners to you. I ask that you support it. Your partnership plays a crucial role in the success and momentum of the University of Nebraska. It is a great point of pride for us that we deliver $9 in economic activity for every $1 that you invest in us. We are working every day to grow that return on investment even further. We also recognize that taxpayer dollars cannot and will not be a cure-all to the headwinds coming our way. A business as usual mindset will not be enough to maintain our trajectory in this context of an evolving and challenging landscape for all of higher education. Those challenges that I've just talked about might be summed up into one simple math equation: rising expenses plus limited revenues. The question for me, for our Board of Regents, for our chancellors, is how we solve the equation for the long term so that the quality, affordability, and competitiveness of our university is preserved for Nebraskans today and well into the future. We could let the headwinds carry us along, in which case it is easy to anticipate some of the consequences. I just read a report from Moody's that predicts more than half of public universities in the United States will operate at a deficit in fiscal year 2023. Another 20% will only break even. Could the University of Nebraska be in one of those groups? We could if we choose a path of little resistance. But senators, this is not how we're going to do business. Nebraskans do not expect their university to operate in the red. We are fortunate that thanks to conservative fiscal management by our Board of Regents and administration, we are on solid financial footing today. Our balance sheet is strong as confirmed by Moody's and other ratings agencies. We have adequate cash on hand as any responsible business should. These one-time dollars can provide a temporary cushion, but as I remind our teams, once we spend cash, it's gone. In other words, using cash doesn't do anything to address recurring budget gaps. A few other points about cash, since I get these questions from time to time, and it can be a little bit confusing. When it comes to cash, I think of the Goldilocks principle. We don't want too much. We also don't want too little, because that would put our bond ratings at risk. We want our cash position to be just right. I would tell you that I believe we have found that sweet spot. The University of Nebraska today has about 220 days of cash on hand. That is exactly at the median among all of our Big Ten peer institutions and other AA1 rated universities, which is to say the top 10% of financially rated universities. We are proud to be part of that esteemed group. Of course, good bond ratings aren't just a talking point, they're a benefit to Nebraskans. Our rating allows us to borrow money at lower rates, saving students and taxpayers millions of dollars. Now, I know 220 days of cash might sound like a lot. In reality, a great deal of the cash on our balance sheet is restricted or committed. For example, most of you know that the university runs a full-fledged farming operation. That requires working capital by next year's seed, livestock, hay, and other needs. Could we spend this cash to address budget shortfalls? Well, we could, but that would be actually eating our seed corn. Our cash on the balance sheet also includes football season ticket renewals that are paid in advance. These funds will be part of the athletics budget for the upcoming year. I suspect Husker fans aren't renewing their tickets with the expectation that we'll use that money to pay for general operations. In short, after factoring in all these kinds of restrictions, the university typically operates with 60 to 90 days of cash. Now, for a $3 billion a year enterprise, I would suggest that's pretty efficient. Using our cash reserves to fund ongoing operations would only set us up for a future fiscal cliff. And I'd not in good faith spend one-time dollars and then turn around and come to you with a huge deficit request. We intend to remain on solid financial footing, even with the new challenges that I've just described ahead. And so, as I have shared with our leadership teams, we're going to have to make some tough decisions ahead, so we don't become one of those universities that Moody's predicts will operate in the red. That starts with strong cost controls. Conversations about budget cuts are rarely easy. If there was low-hanging fruit, most of it is gone. We have cut $75 million in spending at the university over the past 5 years in order to keep our budget balanced, including consolidation of business functions like IT, purchasing, and facilities. In my office of the president at Varner Hall, we have reduced our staff by 20%. 1 in 5 of my own people that work for me in Varner Hall are not there today that were there when I started. The university's current operating budget was approved by the board, held year-over-year spending growth to 1.3%, the same yearly growth that our former regent, now Governor Flynn, has brought to the state government overall. The university built a conservative budget plan to weather the fiscal challenges brought by the pandemic and are pleased that our discipline is showing results. Candidly, the conversations get more difficult from here on out. The process of cutting our budget takes time. We have not yet made any major decisions. Our guiding principle will be to direct our resources where they will create the most impact. Accessible and high-quality education, world-class research, and workforce development. We will need to become more nimble, more creative, more adaptable to make the most of every dollar that Nebraskans entrust to us. Meanwhile, we have been able to provide predictability to students and families by freezing tuition over the past 2 years. We will talk with the Board of Regents about whether the tuition freeze is sustainable. It is a little too early to know what kind of tuition increase you might bring to the board. We will not make that decision until after you and the legislature and your colleagues have completed your work. But I can tell you that we will not balance our budget on the backs of our students. As you will hear from several University of Nebraska students who will follow me, accessibility for Nebraskans is a fundamental part of our mission and a key factor in students' decision to enroll. Members of the committee, there is a reason we were willing to face the headwinds and have the tough conversations. The reason is this. The University of Nebraska is as important to the growth, competitiveness, and quality of life of our state as it has ever been in our 150-year history. Nebraska's workforce challenges are significant and urgent. The Board of Regents met several weeks ago, and we heard a report from our Center on Public Affairs Research that I hope would set alarm bells off for every person tuning in. Not only is Nebraska's brain drain persistent, in some cases worsening, but we are not competitive in the share of our population with a bachelor's degree or higher. We ranked just 26th in the country. At the very time when the fastest growing, highest paying jobs like those in healthcare, IT, and engineering are those that overwhelmingly require a 4-year degree. No entity in the state can deliver that kind of skilled workforce like the University of Nebraska. No other entity delivers research on the scale and depth of the University of Nebraska. In cancer, agriculture, national defense, and so many other areas that are immediately relevant to the lives of our citizens. We are prepared to think differently about how to continue to deliver those kinds of results for Nebraskans. We are fortunate to benefit from your partnership as we chart the path forward. I want to say thank you for your time, and I'd be more than pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, President Carter. Need to turn the hearing over to Vice Chair Bishop.
Thank you, President. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, President Carter, for being here. I know you and I have spoke before, and I was encouraged to hear what you had to say. So bear with me on these hard questions. I know you're newer to the university system, but I have been talking to private, nonprofit health systems in particular, and your revenues are down and enrollment is down. Can you share with us what your public speech policy is for your employees? And just during the pandemic, I can kind of finish my thought. During the pandemic, a lot of these private institutions came in neutral, right? And the University of Nebraska Medical Center did not come in neutral. And I'm just wondering if that places these private institutions at a disadvantage. Maybe they did have an opinion. It was very highly charged political opinion in the state and in the country, right? And the university came out boldly on one side of that conversation. And I wonder if that puts those private institutions at a disadvantage, because the university then has the ability, if they lose customers, to come to the state to make up the difference. But those private institutions don't have that flexibility that you all have. So have you created a better policy around that? Like most companies have a political speech policy around what their employees should do on company email or being a representative of the organization. And maybe you get a broader range of students coming, especially in Nebraska.
So let me, there's kind of a couple questions in there, and let me try to address the enrollment piece first. I could go through a much more detailed discussion about enrollment and our history during the pandemic and then where we are today, and then compare that to the national trend. The bottom line is we're 2.2% down over the last year. I'm not happy about that, and I've been very public about that. We actually grew enrollment during the pandemic. We grew our enrollment 1%. I testified on that for some of the senators that were here. I was proud of that because of some of the things that we did. Compared to the national averages, our enrollment drop is significantly better than the national average. If you were to go back and look at enrollment going all the way back to 2012 to the last, just go back 2 years. So 10 years from 2012 to 2022, enrollment nationally is down over 10%. Enrollment during the pandemic today is down on average about 5%. Even Creighton was down 5%. So our 2.2%, although I'm not happy about that, and that does hurt our revenue stream when I'm talking about state aided budget, especially when we have tuition frozen for predictability and create programs that are about affordability and accessibility, like Nebraska Promise, a program that we paid for ourselves and not on the backs of the taxpayers or this legislature. I would say we're doing better than others compared to us, but I'm still not happy about that. I will also share with you that we're looking forward to what the nation is calling an enrollment cliff. And this is based on lack of birth rates nationally. There's a prediction that enrollment across the nation, we're talking roughly about 6,000 colleges and universities, starting in the year 2025, will see 10 to 15% reduction from where we are even now. That's just based on the population who might be eligible for four-year university. We won't see that as significantly here in the state of Nebraska. Even though our birth rates, as I just testified, are slowing, particularly with the white population here in the state of Nebraska, our enrollment cliff will probably be closer to 2027, and it'll be somewhere in the 5% range. So we have work to do. We have work to do on enrollment to make sure that we are still making ourselves affordable and accessible to Nebraskans, for which 80% of our total enrollment serves. We also have work to do to make sure we're attractive to out-of-state students, and then finding the right number of international students that often will pay double the enrollment rate or the tuition rate, which is not only a benefit for us, but also a benefit for our students who will have access and exposure to some of our international students. Now, when it comes to public statements, we do have a policy, and I would respectfully push back on you and say that anybody that came here and spoke and identified themselves as a Nebraska medicine employee or any type of other university employee or any email that you've gotten that had a logo attached to it was out of bounds of our policy. So we have a stated policy. We've reiterated that. We've even had to go back and counsel people to remind them if they come and testify or speak or send an email, it is in their position as a private citizen, even our students. So I think we're pretty clear about that. I'm aware of some of the people that have came and spoken. They do not speak on behalf of the university. So we are no different than any other private institution. We don't take positions on many of these things because we are a public entity. And I'll just say finally, this aligns with my own personal core values. I served in uniform for 38 years. I became somewhat adept, particularly as a senior flag officer, on how to be apolitical. And I run the university in a manner that I consider to be apolitical. I serve everybody. I follow the Constitution. I believe in the First Amendment. And those that want to speak, especially when I have 50,000 students and 16,000 faculty and staff, as you might imagine, there's going to be some opinions. And I have to say, I'm proud that people can express their opinion in a place like this, but they're not speaking on behalf of the university.
I appreciate that.
Any other questions? Sam?
How about an update on winter training and the spring game that'll come up?
Well, I love talking about athletics, and you know that we've got some really positive things to look forward to. Our athletic programs at the Division II at UNK are really exciting. Our women's basketball team just won the first game in their MIAA league. UNK wrestling is undefeated and going for another national championship this year. We've turned around some of our programs in basketball here this year, and I'm really pleased to see Coach Fred Hoiberg do as well as he's done. Our baseball team just beat Vanderbilt this afternoon, which a lot of you know, Vanderbilt's usually a top 5 program, so great for Coach Will Bolt. And then, of course, you all are aware that we hired a significant coach, Coach Matt Rule, and I'll say for the record that his salary is not paid for by the Nebraska taxpayers. It's paid by Husker Athletics. But that said, he is making a change to how we're approaching football. And I know Nebraskans are proud of this storied program with 5 national championships. Matt Rule is going to be the coach that is going to bring us back and make us excited about Husker football. You're going to see a spring football game that will not look like a flag football game. It's going to actually have contact. It's going to be an exciting game. I wouldn't be surprised to see us put more than 60,000 fans in the stadium for the spring game. Some of you may have seen a Husker motorcycle that I donated to Husker Athletics. I promise that will get a preview at that game. And then I just know we'll continue on. You saw another major announcement we just made, kind of honoring the 50th year anniversary of Title IX. We're going to be doing outdoor volleyball with all three of our programs to include the state college system, with Wayne State taking on UNK and UNO taking on UNL in an outdoor volleyball game in our Husker Memorial Football Stadium. And we're challenging Nebraskans to sell it out. It'll break the record. In fact, it'll be the second largest attendance of any outdoor volleyball game in the world if we can fill our stadium. So there's a lot to be excited about. And of course, as a former hockey player, I can't say how excited I am about UNO hockey playing really well at the end of the year and hopefully get an NCAA berth. I hope that answers your question.
It does.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you, President. Next, I would like to invite up NU Board of Regents, Chair Tim Clare. Welcome, Regent.
Thank you, Vice Chairperson Wishart, members of the Appropriations Committee, good afternoon. My name is Tim Clare, Timclare. I represent District 1 on the University of Nebraska Board of Regents, and I have the privilege of serving as the chair for 2023. I'm pleased to be here on behalf of the board in support of the university's budget request. I believe this is a thoughtful, responsible request in line with the board's commitment to fiscal conservatism, and I join President Carter in asking you to support it. And I certainly add my gratitude to Governor Pillen for putting forward a budget recommendation that recognizes the value of the University of Nebraska. If you know me at all, you know that one of the topics that I'm most passionate about is workforce development. I talk about it at every chance I have. I know this committee is also keenly focused on solving the urgent workforce challenges facing our state, and we thank you for your leadership on that as well. The Board of Regents is having the same conversations. Brian Sloan will speak to you later, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but I suspect he will say that workforce represents a generational challenge for Nebraska. I could not agree more. And I may be biased, but after my 14 plus years on the Board of Regents, I am more convinced than ever that the University of Nebraska is your #1 partner when it comes to workforce and economic growth. As estimates are that in 2030, 65% of the jobs in Nebraska will require a college education. The 9-to-1 ROI that President Carter mentioned does not begin to cover the full extent to which the university creates economic impact that ripples across the entire state. Put simply, your support of the University of Nebraska represents an investment in our future leaders, jobs, and overall competitiveness. Our budget request would put the university in a position to advance our shared goals for economic growth in several key ways. Number one, as President Carter mentioned, a stable base of state support is crucial to our ability to keep tuition affordable. In fact, affordability and accessibility are hallmarks at the University of Nebraska. Historically, we know that there is a direct relationship between the state support and tuition. Our strong partnership with you has helped maintain our position as one of the most affordable universities in our peer group. We need to remain affordable and accessible so every student who wants to pursue a university degree can do so. At the end of the day, more access for students means more workforce for Nebraska. Number two, the Nebraska Career Scholarships are already making a significant impact. Today, 430 University of Nebraska students are pursuing degrees in high-demand fields like engineering, healthcare, math, computer science, with support from the career scholarships. These students will go on to become the future STEM workforce of Nebraska, leaders who will start their own companies, make research differences that will change lives, and create good jobs for our communities, growing those communities and growing our state. I was honored to be a part of the effort to launch the Nebraska Career Scholarships. And I'm so thankful and grateful to former Governor Ricketts for supporting the program, which also has an internship component. And now Governor Pillen for continuing his support. With your support, we will create opportunities for even more students to grow or to earn degrees in areas that will grow our economy. I would add that the board is actively exploring strategies to expand university scholarships so that we can compete even more successfully for Nebraska students, as well as talent outside our state's borders. Number three, the investment in the UNC-UNMC Rural Health Facility in Kearney will be nothing short of transformational for our state. The statistics around the shortages of healthcare professionals in rural communities are startling and sobering. I know many of you are seeing these challenges firsthand in your respective districts. The survival of rural communities depends in part on quality and accessible healthcare. This is a perfect example of how the University of Nebraska saw a need, joined hands with partners in the public and private sectors, and came up with a solution to serve the people of our state. We will do all these things in the context of a very modest budget request that will require us to make tough decisions to keep our spending growth to a minimum. President Carter talked about the strong financial footing that we are on today. I am very proud to be serving on the University of Nebraska board through a period of such prudent fiscal management. We are going to have to roll up our sleeves yet again and do more hard work internally, but I have complete faith in our leadership to invest our resources where they will create the greatest impact for our students, our workforce, and the state. Our request sends a strong message that we will be responsible and disciplined in putting your dollars to good work, and I'm proud to support it. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Dorn.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. And I maybe should have asked President Carter this, but could you update us on where the process is in replacing Chancellor Green?
Well, do you want to speak on that, Ted, or I know. Okay, I appreciate that. That sounds like a meeting that we're always in. We hired a search firm, AGB, and I might add that was the same search firm that helped us attract President Carter and Chancellor Lee from UNO. AGB initially met with people from across the state to put together leadership pillars, because those leadership pillars are really important in terms of attracting what the job is going to entail and what we're looking for to grow our institution. We sought input from around the state on that. We also sought input from what the job description is going to look like and what Nebraskans expect from the chancellor. And that was all. And we've also put together a diverse committee that will be looking at different candidates as it relates to the leadership pillars that we've put together and the job description, if you will. So that process, I might add too that it's a tough time for university leadership when we've got, I believe there's 7 of the 14 chancellors in the Big Ten that are either brand new or there's vacancies. So we're in a very competitive market right now, but leadership matters. And I think we're seeing that from President Carter on down, that leadership in this position of chancellor for UNL is an important hire. But we're going to attract a great candidate. We're going to fulfill our duty back to the state.
Approximate timeline of maybe when that could be fulfilled?
Well, if somebody great comes along, it could be filled very quickly, but it may take a period of time. I will tell you this, we're not going to settle. Leadership matters.
Okay.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
President Carter, do you care to respond? Do you have anything to add?
I thought Regent Clay answered it very, very well. I should also tell you that the search advisory committee led by Dean Tiffany Hang Moss has been put together, and they're doing great work already. They have finished the leadership pillars. They'll be published sometime early next week. We already have interests. The interviews will happen. The Board of Regents will be involved, as will I. And as in terms of the date, Chancellor Green's contract ends on June 30th.
Thank you. We'll go to our next official testifier, UNMC Student Regent Nicole Kent. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Nicole Kent, Nicolekent, and I have the honor to serve as the Student Senate President and Student Regent for the University of Nebraska Medical Center, where I am a third-year student in the College of Medicine. I'm also a proud alumna of the University of Nebraska at Kearney. I'm appearing today in an official capacity on behalf of the University of Nebraska system and representing our nearly 50,000 students to urge your support for the full NU system's biennial budget request. I grew up in Benkelman, Nebraska, a small town in the southwest corner of our state. And ever since I was in 8th grade, I've known I wanted to be a physician. When I started exploring colleges in high school, prestige and my big aspirations drew my attention to colleges outside of our state's borders. However, I ultimately chose to stay in Nebraska and attend UNK thanks to scholarship opportunities that I received, including a scholarship as a part of the Kearney Health Opportunities Program, which guaranteed me a spot at UNMC as long as I kept up my end of the bargain academically. Not only was UNK affordable, but I also knew it would provide me with a world-class education. The first phase of the UNMC-UNK partnership opened up the year before I started college. And the idea of training in that facility as an undergraduate was incredibly enticing. I also knew that I would have the opportunity to conduct hands-on research with world-class faculty as an undergraduate at UNK, which isn't always an option at other institutions. Ultimately, UNK opened up so many doors that have helped make me who I am today. I served in leadership roles at UNK, including as the student body president and student regent. I was involved in the community, and ultimately I was very well prepared for my next step as a medical student at UNMC. As a student at UNMC, I've trained in state-of-the-art facilities with world-renowned faculty. I have worked hard and taken advantage of every opportunity presented to me, including the path that led me to sit before you today. The affordability, outstanding facilities, and incredible opportunities at the University of Nebraska have without a doubt kept me in Nebraska. And I will break from script right now to tell you that I very recently, and by very recently, I mean I haven't even had a chance to call and tell my parents, received a phone call that I was accepted to the primary care residency program at UNMC, which will allow me to use my 4th year of medical school to train as a resident and allow me to use my 3rd year of residency to get extra training. So the University of Nebraska is once again providing opportunity, keeping students like me here in the state and providing an outstanding education for my future. Sometimes we hear stories like mine, and I think that we see them as rare or unique, especially for a kid from small town Nebraska, but I do not believe that's the case. Every day at the University of Nebraska, from my undergraduate days at UNK to my time at UNMC, I have been surrounded by brilliant, kind individuals from all over our state, from across the country, and from around the globe. Each student in our university system has different educational goals and aspirations. Each choose their path and their education with a different worldview, but all come out changed for the better and ready to make significant contributions to our state. The University of Nebraska provides opportunities for students like me to rise and achieve all that we are capable of. I hope to practice family medicine in rural Nebraska upon completion of my training. And I know that the vitality of my community is dependent not just on me, but also on well-trained teachers, business leaders, other healthcare professionals, business leaders, agriculturalists, and more. The University of Nebraska is the entity that can train young Nebraskans for the future, but it takes support from lawmakers like yourselves to maintain high-quality, affordable education. And that is why I urge you to support the full biennial budget request from the University of Nebraska system, because by investing in the University of Nebraska, you are investing in all Nebraskans and the future prosperity of our beloved state. Thank you for the opportunity today, and I will take any questions you may have.
Any questions from the committee? Thank you for your testimony. I also came from a small town to the university. It's intimidating, but just do your homework and go to class and come out. All right, study hard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Student Regent Sadi.
Hello. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and the members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Emily Sadi, Emily Saadi, and I currently serve as the Student Body President and Student Regent for the University of Nebraska at Kearney. Today, I have the honor to speak in an official capacity on behalf of the University of Nebraska system and our nearly 50,000 students in support of the university's biennial budget request. Today, I want to speak to the impact of financial barriers to higher education and financial stress that happens on our students and how adequate state funding for the NU system can help alleviate these issues for students and entice them to stay here in Nebraska. The impact and importance of receiving a college education has tremendously increased for current students within the university system and prospective students preparing to join. The world we have been raised in is ever changing, shifting, and advancing at a rate of acceleration unseen before our generation, and containing far more unknowns than knowns. By 2030, 65% of jobs in Nebraska will require at least some higher education. And because of this reality, the pressure to attend and complete college weighs heavily on students. So does the financial burden. Financial realities are a key issue for most students when deciding where to go to college. Students quickly become overwhelmed and feel helpless when making a college decision because we know that most students leave college with a significant financial burden, but we also know how necessary it is to attain a four-year degree. This stress will continue to cross students' minds daily, even after entering college and being on campus. While preparing to testify before you today, I asked students on my campus a simple question. Do financial concerns actually impact you and your education regularly? One response from a student that really stood out to me was financial factors are the factors that determine whether I will be able to finish my degree or if I will have to leave here in a year or two because I cannot afford to continue. This is the reality for so many of our students across each of our campuses in Nebraska. Students regularly overextend themselves, often at the sacrifice of their mental and physical health, by working one or two external jobs on top of being a full-time student in order to be able to attend college, not to stay out of debt, but simply be able to attend. As a mental health crisis continues to disproportionately impact college-aged individuals, it's exceedingly important to recognize that financial burdens affect students' mental health, impacting a student's ability to contribute to Nebraska. Personally, as a student raised right here in Nebraska, the affordability of the NU system was one of the biggest draws when comparing it to other schools in Nebraska and across the nation. The reason the NU system remains affordable is largely due to the long-time financial investments made by esteemed lawmakers like yourselves. At a time when our state seeks to grow our economy, increase our competitiveness, and ensure our college-age students remain in Nebraska, it is more crucial than ever to prioritize affordable higher education. By reducing financial barriers and alleviating the financial concerns of our students, the young people of Nebraska can focus on continuing their education and becoming full, contributing, and beneficial members to our Nebraska society. I urge you to support students by supporting the University of Nebraska's full budget request. Thank you, and I will take any questions you may have.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Doran.
Thank you, Senator Clemens, and thank you for being here today. You talk about the financial burden. Were you able to or partake in scholarships, or how did that affect you?
Yes, so when I was applying to colleges as a senior in high school, I applied to a lot of larger name colleges like Creighton University and Notre Dame. And the large draw of wanting to be a pre-law student and wanting to have that on my resume as an undergraduate student when applying to law schools was very attractive. However, the realistic nature of things led me to look at a lot of smaller schools in terms of financial realities, and knowing, wanting to go on to law school, that's also going to be a big investment in my future. And so when visiting the NU system and having conversations with people on campus at the University of Nebraska at Kearney, I realized that having that big name isn't as important as having those opportunities, and being able to do that at not a huge financial cost was far more beneficial than attending a school with a big name. And so I've been the recipient of many scholarships that have helped me keep my college costs low so far. And honestly, I don't think I would be here before you today without those, because I knew if I couldn't commit my time to this position, it wasn't something that I wanted to take on. So being able to rely on scholarships to take care of the financial burdens, rather than working the two jobs that I worked the last couple of years in college, I was able to fully commit to this position and dedicate my time to advocating for students.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Emily, and congratulations on being a student regent. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
And also wanted to congratulate Nicole for your position appointment. And thank you for being willing to go back and serve the rural medical needs of our state. Next, we invite Mr. Sloan.
Chairman Clemens and member of the Appropriations Committee, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Brian Sloan, Bryanslone. I'm president of the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'm here to testify in support of the portions of the University of Nebraska appropriations request that address workforce shortages and seek to increase enrollment at the university. The Nebraska Chamber recognizes that the University of Nebraska system plays a crucial role in developing the state's workforce and attracting talent to our state, and is a valuable partner in that effort. This has always been the case, but probably more urgent than ever. Given that Regent Claire set me up, I might as well get to it. I do think that this workforce shortage is our generational challenge of the 30s, 20s, and 30s in this state. You need only look at the declining birth rates and see what that means. The cliff is coming, and the ability to continue to grow this state is going to be dependent upon our ability to retain, attract, and develop workforce. Immediately after this hearing, I'm going to testify in the Revenue Committee on a tax bill. And we'll have a great debate over how to reduce property taxes and income taxes. But the reality, if you really ask me the question, will we be able to reduce our tax burdens in this state over the next 20 years? I would tell you, give me the answer to the workforce question. Are we going to be able to develop our workforce and continue to grow our economy? Because that's going to be the most central part of this. And so as I look at this, the Nebraska Chamber has responded to the workforce issue by setting as one of our 4 key policies this year a priority to grow enrollment in our post-secondary institutions by 10% by the year 2025. That's an ambitious goal, but we think a very important goal. And we believe that this appropriations request before the committee includes provisions that will allow the university to reposition itself towards meeting that goal. In drafting the biennial budget, the Nebraska Chamber recognizes that this committee and the legislature will have to balance competing priorities. But speaking for the Nebraska Chamber, we believe that President Carter and his leadership team, along with the Board of Regents, are thinking differently and are being a great partner and seeking to drive more impact and performance in the work the university performs every single day, and driving workforce solutions that are important in the future. in many ways, and I will go off script yet one more time, for the 18 to 34-year-olds that we've identified in the blueprint process as the most important piece to our economic future, our post-secondary institutions are the front door of that process, of that recruiting process. And so we find that specifically a couple items that have been spoken about earlier today, the Nebraska Career Scholarship Program, helping develop more workforce, particularly in STEM careers, as well as growing post-secondary enrollment and the operational funding for the UNC-UNMC Rural Health Education Facility are incredibly important, and we're pleased that they're included in this recommendation. This is particularly the UNC-UNMC item is uniquely a Nebraska idea, which this committee initiated in the last legislative session, and will assist in filling key rural workforce and healthcare needs with more rural doctors, nurses, and pharmacists. We look forward to enhancing our rural community's provision of crucial quality of life services to existing residents and future Nebraska residents being recruited to our state. We appreciate the university's leadership in developing visionary public-private partnerships, addressing major workforce needs in our state. And as you heard from President Carter, the university administration, along with the Board of Regents, has taken a conservative fiscal approach to their financial management. It seems clear from their appropriations requests and the testimony today that the university is beginning a process to address how they are structured, how they're focusing on growth, and how they'll drive enrollment to address key workforce shortages. Nebraska Chamber urges the committee to act favorably on this appropriations request, particularly those elements designed to increase enrollment. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Maderas.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, President Sloan, for being here.
Thank you.
Nice to talk to you again. I was wondering, so I'm a Goodrich Scholar. And since we're being stewards of Nebraska taxpayers, and especially the NOG grants, is that right? The Nebraska Opportunity Scholarship, the Nebraska Opportunity
I understand
Grant?
what you're saying, yes.
Is there an opportunity for a program such as what Goodrich does? Because if I'm not incorrect, I think they have an 80% graduation rate of those students. And I think that the taxpayers are looking for better outcomes for their tax dollars. I don't think they have a problem investing it if they have great outcomes. And since the Goodrich Scholarship has such good track record of producing those graduates, and I don't think it's an extra cost at all to do that. It's a restructuring of a program to keep those kids intact for the first 2 years of their program. And they just have great outcomes in that. And I know I have talked to other senators. Let's find the programs that are doing it right, especially when we're using tax dollars in programs, and go to them and have them help us do that. So if those grant students are graduating at a lower rate than the average student, then we need to figure out how do we make them more successful. And I only know of the Goodrich Scholarship, but I'm sure there are others, but they've done a really, really good job of great outcomes for those students, and they're the exact same demographic that we're talking about. So it can be done. Could we do that on a broader scale so that we're not throwing tax dollars at maybe a student that goes a year or two with no outcome? Right? And then they go back to the job that they would have had right out of high school anyway. Could you work with the university at developing something like that?
So absolutely, and I suspect, Senator, that I'm not an expert on the Goodrich scholarships, but something we could have a conversation with definitely offline.
It is a needs-based scholarship.
I suspect over the next 10 years, I'll be having lots of discussions with the University of Nebraska about all sorts of scholarship programs, because the needs are substantial. The needs are in the tens of thousands of people that we need to recruit to Nebraska over the next 5 to 10 years. And so we should be looking at all kinds of scholarships. I do think what's in this request is a key part in terms of the STEM side of this. But I probably, as much as anybody, I understand scholarships. Listening to the earlier conversation, Senator, you might appreciate this. I paid for my own schooling. I ran completely out of money the last semester of law school. And Senator, I had to basically hawk everything I owned, including my high school ring, but more importantly, my my trumpet, Senator Clements. And I thought you'd appreciate that more than anybody, but that was what got me through the last 2 weeks of law school.
I want to finish in saying that what you're trying to achieve through the chamber, I think that this group, this demographic is really ripe for staying in Omaha. They oftentimes have really strong family ties and aren't as likely to leave as maybe some other students. So I think it's a really good opportunity if we can just get them out of the university.
I definitely would like to work with you, Senator, on learning more about that. I think as we look at this, we look at the numbers involved, we're going to be very engaged not only in retention, but attraction from other states and actually attraction internationally to solve our numbers. And so we are going to need a suite of scholarships over time to address all three areas. So I'd
Other
love to work with you.
questions from the committee? Seeing none, I will say I still have my college trumpet.
I figured.
And, right, the Cornhusker Marching Band was a fun place to be in it. Boy, yeah, I'm going to hang on to it. Sorry that you had to give yours up. Thank you for your testimony, President Sloan.
Thank you, Senator.
Next, President McArgue.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and the members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Mark McHargue, MARKMCHARGUE, and I'm the president of Nebraska Farm Bureau Federation, and I'm here to testify in support of the University of Nebraska system and get the privilege of being the wrap up here. So please don't ask too many hard questions of me. As a land grant institution in the state, this is the home to the third largest agricultural complex in the country. The University of Nebraska system plays a critical role in supporting and strengthening Nebraska's agriculture economy from the applied research it performs to the education that it provides. Adequately funding the university will enable it to prioritize the critical work it does for agricultural producers, as well as the workforce and communities that we all rely on. The key aspect important to supporting agriculture and rural communities is the operational funding of the new UNMC Rural Health Education Facility, included in the committee's preliminary recommendations. One of the cornerstones of rural economic development is high quality, affordable, and accessible healthcare. Nebraska Farm Bureau appreciates the work of the university is doing to fill key rural workforce healthcare needs in our communities. We need more doctors, nurses, pharmacists, physical therapists, and radiologists in our rural communities. This new facility and program funding will do exactly that. We want to thank this committee for making rural healthcare initiative a priority last year, this year, and beyond. Ensuring a strong investment in the Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources is critically important to us. Innovation in precision agriculture must continue to be the university's priority. The development of operational models and decision supporting tools using on-farm data to enhance producer efficiency and profitability, rural prosperity, and food and water security is critical. Cybersecurity in agriculture is paramount as well. The past 2 years, the FBI has issued warnings of threats to our food, fuel, feed, and fiber production facilities. Through the Department of Homeland Security, National Counterterrorism, Innovation, Technology, and Education, that's a lot of words, but that's INSIGHT. They're centered at UNO, as well as INAR and College of Engineering. The university needs the core resources to address not only human and technical dimensions of these cybersecurity threats, but how best to build resilience within our food production complex to protect our nation's food supply. Disruptive technology changes on the horizon will have major impacts for agriculture over the next several decades. Electric power, autonomous machinery, and digital network farms and ranches will require tremendous computing power. As modern agriculture transitions from mechanized to digital, the university must leverage its resources to build the first of its kind agricultural cyber proving ground for the future of cyber-intensive precision agriculture. We know the University of Nebraska respects and values agriculture as the state's #1 industry, which along with our natural resources powers our economy here in Nebraska. The university has research and extension and education centers all across the state. It needs to be a leader in applied research, innovation, and its application to support Nebraska businesses and producers, reaching the highest level of student success and achievement, catalyzing economic development opportunities, and enhancing the well-being of Nebraskans. Farm Bureau understands that this committee has to balance competing priorities as you draft the biennial budget. Property tax relief continues to be our top policy priority, but maintaining a strong and future-focused university system is also critical because of the work it does for Nebraska agriculture. We appreciate the work of President Carter and Governor Pillen, what they have done to position the university in this year's budget discussion. As key strategic partners of the university and Governor Pillen, we support the university being funded to the level necessary to ensure Nebraska agriculture is competitive and secure at home and around the world. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Senator Dorn.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Thank you for being here, Mark. You mentioned quite often here how the university has been involved in our agriculture in the state. Can you describe a little more, I guess, the importance of what the university means to agriculture and what agriculture needs from the university in the state? And then I see also community college, you're up next. Maybe mention a little bit about something about that, of how you view the overall bigger picture.
Yeah, Senator, I appreciate that question because I get asked pretty frequently about education in Nebraska. Representing the large ag sector, I get to travel quite widely across the state, especially in rural communities, and the conversation of education comes up continually. And what I tell people is that often we think about agriculture just as the ones that are actually planting the corn or taking care of the livestock. And there's a lot of places in those categories that, like our community colleges, actually play a great role. We may not need a 4-year degree, but to care for that part of it, we may have a 4-year degree, but a 2-year might be just fine. And we are fully for that at Nebraska Farm Bureau. But relative to the university and agriculture, what a lot of people don't realize is that we need agronomists. When I have someone come and look at my cornfield, I want someone that has multiple years of experience studying insects, studying the plant health, all those things for them to help make a good recommendation for me. We need biologists. We need mechanical engineers. Agriculture runs on equipment. We need veterinarians. That takes more than 2 years, right? We need data scientists. We need computer programmers. We need economists. All those things surround the agricultural system that the university plays a critical role in those types of education that we also need to run agriculture in the state.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Now we'll open up to other proponents for, well, this is an agency hearing. So we're open to any testifiers for University of Nebraska budget. Welcome.
Thank you. Senator Clemens, Senator Lippincott, Senator Vargas, Senator Richard, Senator McDonald, Senator Dover, Senator Dorn, Senator Armendariz. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this afternoon. My name is Alan Thorson. It's ALAN THORSON. I'm here today as president of the Nebraska Cancer Coalition, also known as NC2, to testify on the university budget. I'm a colon and rectal surgeon and clinical professor of surgery at the University of Nebraska College of Medicine and the Creighton University School of Medicine. I have devoted a significant portion of my career to assisting patients in managing cancer and working to improve the lives of cancer patients. I am a past president of the Nebraska Medical Association, the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, the American Cancer Society, and the American Society of Colon and Rectal Surgeons. I have served as a member of the American Joint Commission on Cancer, the AJCC, and the Commission on Cancer of the American College of Surgeons. I have reviewed research proposals for the American Cancer Society and for the International Cancer Control, Union of International Cancer Control, or the UICC. I have participated as a researcher and principal investigator in basic research, phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. Progress on cancer research has been excellent, although far from complete, with new discoveries leading to new questions bringing us deeper to understandings that could not even have been imagined only a few years ago. But a very important part of that research has been particularly difficult to navigate. That is the process of translating those results into the clinic and health decision-making, the delivery of recommended and timely care to the right patient at the right time. It is frequently stated that the process of translating new research findings into clinical practice takes an average of 17 years. NC2 is the nonprofit neutral voice of oncology in Nebraska, providing Nebraska citizens and healthcare providers access to education and resources to prevent, screen, and manage cancer while supporting cancer patients, caregivers, survivors, and their families. Through these actions, NC2 is engaged in speeding the process of bringing recent research and recommendations to those at risk for cancer, which is all of us. NC2 has existed for 12 years as a statewide nonprofit organization, primarily on grant funding. NC2 is organized to include statewide engagement with multiple healthcare systems and clinics, doctors, advanced practice professionals, nurses, mental health professionals, extension offices, advocacy groups, industry and corporate partners, rural and urban associations and nonprofits, together with cancer patients, survivors, and caregivers in all 93 Nebraska counties. We are the only organization in Nebraska that exists to connect people and resources for cancer prevention. Our governing board consists of representatives for the major health systems across our state, oncologists, radiation oncologists, primary care physicians, nurses, insurance providers, chief medical officers, executives from the Nebraska Medical Association, Nebraska Oncology Society, and the American Cancer Society, researchers, and business executives. Our board members represent the communities we serve and are located across the entire state. All have a passion for helping Nebraskans live a better life by having access to the programming of NC2. We are asking this committee to consider a $500,000 annual appropriation to the University of Nebraska Medical Center to contract with an organization located in Nebraska, providing comprehensive cancer support and education through a statewide network working together on cancer management. We have met with university leadership. They fully understand our request. Our state has the 7th highest incidence of pediatric cancer in the country and the highest incidence of pediatric lymphoma in the nation. We have the 27th highest cancer death rate in males and the 24th highest in females. As of 2020, only 76% of Nebraska women are up to date with mammography, which is 35th in the nation, and 32nd in colon cancer screening with only 70% screened. Lung cancer screening can reduce lung cancer deaths by 20%, but only 6% of Nebraskans have been screened. A lack of knowledge on behalf of both patients and providers at least partially contributes to these low screening rates. Since the COVID pandemic, screening rates have fallen even farther due to missed examinations. Not surprisingly, we are now seeing dramatic increases in cancer diagnoses, many times in late stages.
And sir, your time is up. If you could wrap it up, please.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Screening can prevent many cancers and find others earlier when they're treatable and survivable. Extensive education to all Nebraskans is one key to increasing screening rates, clinical trial enrollment, and increasing awareness of treatment alternatives, all which are important factors for improving cancer control. Funding a statewide coalition able to reach all Nebraskans available in all areas is critical to such educational efforts. NC2 is leading the way in this translation of research successes into meaningful opportunities for the people of Nebraska to take advantage of those same successes. The best cancer care becomes available for the true benefit of society when providers, patients, caregivers, survivors, and families are all made aware of opportunities and alternatives throughout the cancer spectrum. Funding this end of research, translating results and findings to meaningful applications represents the least cost, but one of the biggest challenges to the cancer community. With your support, NC2 is anxious to meet this challenge. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm sorry I took more than the time I was allotted, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Other questions from the committee? Thank you, Doctor, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Other testifiers regarding University of Nebraska budget? Seeing none, we have position comments for the record. 30 proponents, no opponents, no one in the neutral. That concludes Agency 51, University of Nebraska. We'll now open a hearing for Agency 83, Community Colleges.
Oh, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people leaving.
We'll wait just a couple of minutes till the room is cleared and if the door is closed again.
Absolutely. You'll have time to get the handouts passed out then too.
All right. Okay, let's see. Very good. And if there are testifiers regarding the community colleges, I'd like for you to move up to the front row so we can identify who's going to be coming up. With that, welcome.
Thank you. Senator Clemens and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Matt Gottschall, MattGottschall, and I'm the president at Central Community College. And I have the honor today of testifying on behalf of all 6 Nebraska community colleges today. I'm going to put them on the spot and have my peers stand up back here behind me just to let you know they're not hecklers, but they are here in case you have any specific questions about a specific college that I'm not able to answer on their behalf. But otherwise, you may just be hearing from me. In addition to my testimony, though, you do have a copy of part of a presentation that Dr. Leah Barrett, the president of Northeast Community College, put together as part of our joint presentation to the Post-Secondary Coordinating Commission earlier this fall. So while we do greatly appreciate the proposed increase in our request, which was also supported by the Coordinating Commission, we would request that you do still consider the total of 4.5% increase of each year of the 2023 to 2025 biennium. Specifically, as it shows there, it's a 3.5% increase for general operating expenses, and the remaining 1% that would go towards our dual enrollment allocation, which began in the 2020-2021 academic year. As you've heard already from our higher education peers, increasing costs impact all of us, including the inflationary pressure for supplies, from welding scrap metal to medical equipment, from transportation to lab supplies. Like all higher education institutions, our personnel costs for negotiated wage increases, higher health insurance and benefits need to remain competitive and make up the majority of our annual expenditures, this will be at least 3 to 5% annually for us. It is imperative that we do remain competitive with other institutions from other states and within the state to recruit and retain quality faculty and staff that we need to educate the needs of our growing workforce. Utility costs are expected to exceed 9%. Updates to technical equipment for our classrooms, unique to community colleges, and information security costs are growing. Now, a real success story of a wise legislature and community college investment can be seen on the page that we look talking about dual credit programming. Originally proposed in 2020 as a way to increase the numbers of educated workers and youth earning college credentials, the legislature sought to provide funds for greater access to a greater number of students and programs through discounting tuition rates. $8 million was the estimate in 2020. And as that was the figure that was needed to reduce dual credit tuition by 80%. The legislature was able to allocate $1 million that first year, with the commitment and growing to $2 million the next year and $3 million this year. So we thank you for that. The graph shows the experiment is working with over 62.3% increase in college credit hours earned while students are still enrolled in high school. That will allow that to continue that commitment and limit the drastic drop once the one-time ARPA funds are expended. We are asking for a 1% increase, which equates to approximately $1 million per year through each of the next 2 bienniums. So our outcomes are something of which all Nebraskans should be proud. Over 95% of our students are from Nebraska, and 88% of our graduates stay in the state to continue their education or to work after graduation. We are flexible and working with over 53,000 credit students and 38,000 non-credit students. We offer programming for youth through post-retirement. We cover every corner of our state and retain highly educated and talented residents in Nebraska. We're expanding our capabilities and our student pipelines to directly address the skilled workforce crisis in Nebraska. So Central joins our community college peers in educating the current and future workforce in Nebraska. We appreciate your continued support in making this a collaborative effort, a model that other states really should emulate. So thank you for your consideration of this testimony, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions, including yours, Senator Dorn, about how we impact agriculture.
Are there questions from the committee? I had one. Senator Dorn, would you ask a question, Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Remy.
You teed me up, so.
Well, yes, and that was part of what I had
Mark
Markey comment on too, if you could, for the community colleges.
Absolutely, and I've been asked about that, especially recently when we talk about tax levy and the importance of property tax investments of what does a farmer or agricultural actually get from community colleges, and it's very easy for me to answer. What they get is they get some skilled nurse aides, LPNs and RNs that are working out in the nursing homes in our small communities that allow our agriculturalists to hopefully retire, and if they need nursing home care, to be able to stay in the communities where they've lived their entire life. We're creating welders that are fixing the equipment and manufacturing the equipment for places like CHI that make the combines for the agriculturalists and tractors and other equipment. We have diesel mechanics that are repairing the equipment when they need it. We have automotive technicians that are repairing their trucks and their other equipment that they occasionally may break down with. We have EMTs to respond if there's an emergency in the field or in their community. We have criminal justice students that are working in sheriff's office across our state who are responding to issues in their communities and out in the country. We obviously have PLC and advanced manufacturing folks helping program the precision agriculture equipment that they have on their farms and that are needed in the manufacturing area to produce the agriculture equipment, not to mention the truck driving training and others. So those are very unique things that we are the only ones creating. The state colleges and the universities, that's not their role and mission, but it is ours, and we embrace it, and we're excited about it. And we really do see that as an important part of supporting not only our agriculturalists, but everyone. Thank you.
Well, and I'll make a quick comment too. Down in Beatrice, which is from my district, we have one of the, I call it community college better ag programs in not only in the country, because I've had some friends that are kids in the internship program that they go not only across the United States, some of them have gone to Australia. So thank the community colleges for having that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually a former agriculture instructor myself. And so, yeah, great agriculture programs in most all of our areas. So, yeah, very glad to have that as an example.
Thank you.
Other committee, I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
I believe we allocated some ARPA funds for dual enrollment and wondered if you received those and how those have been used.
Yes, this is actually the first year that we are able to access those. We have not gotten the funds yet because the way it's okay. It's the way the legislature was written that we don't get it until the end of the year, which will be after June 30th. And those will be distributed proportionally. So not equally, but proportionally on the amount of dual credit enrollment each of us received. So we are offering the discounts now with the expectation we will get a partial reimbursement of that later. And so, yeah, but no, very, very appreciative of that. Very appreciative of the additional capital investments too that were approved, which again, many of us are starting to work on those building projects. And really that's the first and only time we've received capital dollars from the state. Otherwise, we've always relied and needed to rely on our 2-cent levy authority to invest in our buildings.
But you did already put out dual enrollment incentives of some sort.
Yes.
That you'll be getting a reimbursement. Oh, that's good.
That's right. The check's in the mail, we're told. We trust you.
Second item, one thing I'm interested in is transfer credits. When a person gets a 2-year degree from your college, what percentage of those credits can come into a 4-year college, especially University of Nebraska? Are you working with them for that?
Absolutely. I think at any time in our history, I've been involved in community college education for almost 30 years. And this is probably some of the best times in terms of transferability. One, in part because the universities know that they need to rely on our students and are seeing the high quality. And so we do offer that. A large part of the dual enrollment that you're seeing is in transfer related classes. And we're seeing those students get those classes while they're still in high school and then transferring on directly into the state college and university. Nebraska has what's called a Nebraska Transfer Initiative, where there's probably 45 probably 30 classes that we articulate on a rotational basis. So if an English composition 1 class at Central is the same as an English composition 1 competencies at Wayne State, at UNL, at UNO, and several of the private schools. So we really do a good job of making sure that those classes transfer. The other nice thing we have in Nebraska is we have some institutions like Bellevue University that actually are going above and beyond and saying, we're going to take up to 90 credits of your classes at the community college, and you complete in the last 30 credits at Bellevue University, and you get a bachelor's degree. So imagine the cost savings there, even though you're paying private costs for the last 30, you're getting your first 90 at the community college. And that program has been in place for a few years. So it's a great time to be looking at transfer, even though I will say statutorily, that is our second priority is transfer. Our first priority is the vocational and technical education, because we know we're the only ones that are able and are doing that in the state.
Other questions? Senator Dover?
Can you explain these at the 2% levy authority that you spoke of, you referenced?
Yes. Under our current limitations, we have a 2-cent levy authority. Our board can assess for capital improvement. And that's within the 11 cents overall that our boards are limited in order to be able to assess. Now, none of us are at the level limit overall, but most of us do levy the 2-cent levy because that's the only thing we have to use for repair and maintenance and expansion of our facilities. And in my case, we have campuses in Grand Island, Hastings, and Columbus, as well as a significant investment in Kearney. And we also rent our own facilities in Holdridge, Lexington, and Ord. So the only way we can keep those buildings up and running is through that 2-cent levy.
Is there a bill up now, or I thought I was in discussions with Northeast, and I thought they wanted to transfer 0.5% of the mill levy from general operating into to take care of their buildings, upkeep, et cetera. But I thought they were at 1.5% cap, not a 2%.
I'm pretty sure Leah will be behind me to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they're at 2 cents.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Leah.
Other questions?
But I would say, I mean, you look at, why is it 2 cents? Arbitrary number. I mean, it could easily be 3 cents. At one time, it was only 1 cent. And so, but we were able to negotiate that with the legislature about 10 years ago, got that increase from 1 cent to 2 cents. But as we all know, building costs keep going up. A lot of our campuses, many of our campuses were built over 50 years ago. And like myself, that's over 50, I'm starting to have a few more cracks and leaks than I used to. So it's important to keep those up and going and replace roads and the HVAC and things like that. So that 2 cents is just kind of an arbitrary number. So we would like to have that flexibility to move between general and capital, but at this point, it is 2 cents.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your testimony.
Okay.
And we'll invite other testifiers regarding community colleges at this time. Seeing none, I have no position comments for the record. That will conclude Agency 83 community colleges. We're going to switch to bills. First up will be Senator Vargas. The committee needs to switch notebooks.
Take your time.
Looks like the committee's ready. We'll open the hearing for LB 273. Welcome, Senator Vargas.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and fellow members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Tony Vargas, T1Y VARGAS, and I have the pleasure of representing District 7 in the communities of downtown and South Omaha in the Nebraska Legislature. LB 273 is pretty straightforward. Basically, we would be appropriating an additional $7.5 million to the Coordinating Commission on Post-Secondary Education for the Nebraska Opportunity Grant Program. Now, my goal here is simple. It is to increase post-secondary education opportunities for more low-income students. Two handouts that you have in front of you. One is a one-pager in regards to this legislation, and the second is, which will look familiar, is a little bit more of the information that the director of the Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education also handed out. Currently, NOG is the only state-based aid award for students from low-income families. It's funded through general fund appropriations as well as lottery dollars. Now, currently, to be eligible for Nebraska Opportunity Grant Award, students must apply for the FAFSA and have an expected contribution of 110% of the maximum expected family contribution to qualify for a federal Pell Grant. During the 2018-2019 school year, roughly 13,000 students were Nebraska Opportunity Grant recipients, but over 22,000 students qualified for this grant and did not receive any support due to a gap between the award eligibility and the available funds, which again is because general fund appropriations haven't increased in more than 10 years, or not to the level that is needed to actually meet the unmet need. Now what you heard earlier is the most recent data that we have compiled had us around 35th in the country for the amount of state-provided need-based financial aid on a per-student basis. Colleagues, if we are serious about growing our workforce needs, and I think what we heard for one example, from the university system, then from some students, and also from the chamber, we need to make sure that we're meeting our future needs in our economy. We have to get serious about taking measures like this one that will accomplish those goals. Now, LB 273 begins to address the funding issues for these students, which are often the students who are first in their families to attend college. Those who are fighting to break out of a cycle of poverty and want to make a difference for themselves, their families, and their communities, and for Nebraska. Some of you know this. I've experienced these feelings for myself. This bill is very personal for me. I am a first-generation American citizen. I'm the first in my family's generation to go to college and graduate from college. And I will tell you that this was possible because I received a Pell Grant, which is the federal side of the grant in terms of need-based grant at the federal level. But I also received a state-based financial aid like NOC. Actually, the amount that I received was in the amount of $5,000 a year. If it had not been for this, along with a variety of private scholarships and my work study to make sure that I can actually afford higher education, I don't know if I would be here. It's one of the reasons why I was able to achieve my bachelor's degree and get my master's degree. And I can tell you from my own experience that every single dollar makes a difference in achieving these goals. And the more that we can do to potentially increase the award amount by better targeting the limited dollars that we have for NOG awards, the more impactful it will be for these students. I look forward to this conversation today. And like I said, it's personal for me because for the last, my entire time in this legislature, the last 6 years, I've really looked towards what are the grant programs that we do have available at the state level, and this is the only one, and what are some of the financial-based aid or merit-based, like career scholarships, programs that are trying to make it easier for students to go and receive higher education, both public and private and all different types across the state. It's getting to be more expensive. It is getting to be something that is more out of reach for more students. And as we heard, we have more jobs that are available right now that actually pay a very good wage. But if one of the barriers for people getting into these positions is their ability to afford higher education and or not have to work more during that time so that they can actually balance what it is. I can tell you as a first generation student myself, the balancing act that you need to make to be able to manage both classes and everything that you're doing, and in addition, being able to pay and afford higher education is a lot. And we want people to graduate at a minimum at a 6-year graduation rate from 4-year colleges. We want to increase the 4-year graduation rate. We want to make sure that they can go to any private or public school in this area in Nebraska, and also be able to afford some of the other, well, community college and trade schools that are also eligible for this grant. This is an opportunity for us to meet that unmet need, that gap that exists. And my real hope is, I won't be here, many of us won't be here in the future. We could look to a time where NOG is actually meeting the demands of all the need-based aid for students that are eligible, and we are growing our workforce. With that, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Gover.
What can you do with $1,721?
Well, so there's two things. So 1,700 is what's currently provided to those that receive NOG. There are still thousands of people that don't receive any funds. On average, when you look across this country, We have states, even in the surrounding area, the Midwest, that are providing more than 1,700 per student, and they're providing a larger amount of funding to all students, upwards of 2,000, and in some places 3,000, 4,000. I think the real intent is 1,700 is part of a larger package of funds that people receive from private scholarships, from merit-based scholarships, both from the university or some, from the community or national scholarships. But the more need-based aid that we can provide in terms of grant aid from our state, the easier it is for people to have predictability with the funds that they're getting every single year, and the more likely that they actually plan out. And what we're also doing is leveling the playing field for a lot of those that really can't afford this. That, as you can imagine, the conversations people usually have is, I have to work 20 hours or more a week just to be able to afford and make my tuition. Or I have to talk to my parents about getting a second mortgage out to be able to afford this. So 1,700 is, on average, is a really significant deal for many different families when you're talking about the larger aid package. And my hope is that we increase that amount so it's more sustainable for families and first generation students.
I guess the reason I ask is wouldn't it be better to give more of a grant than $1,700? I mean, what?
If you were making a motion to make this more money, Senator Dover, I am all ears. I'll tell you, again, my experience, and this was years ago, I received $5,000 a year of a grant in addition to my federal Pell Grant, and inflation's only risen, and that's a big deal, and I'm sure. Well, I didn't get to answer this, but for Senator Armendariz, programs like the Goodrich Scholarship are leveraging some of these grant-based aid dollars, and it's not enough. They're not even anywhere at scale. I mean, maybe we've reached 2,000 students over the last 40, 50 years in the Goodrich program, and that's a drop in the bucket. We can do more to make sure people finish and graduate, and we can fill those 40, 50,000 jobs that we have that are high-wage jobs. So every little bit's going to help, and I appreciate your help with that.
Is there any requirement for academic requirements, grades to get them receive the money or continue to receive the money?
So there are merit-based scholarships and programs that provide a mixture of merit and need-based, but this is solely based off of need.
Okay. Well, I was the first in my family to graduate. Mm-hmm. I went out and worked 3.5 years roughnecking in Montana and North Dakota, so I could afford school, and I did use Pell Grants also, so I can really appreciate the need.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, we will invite proponents for LB 273. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Clements and members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Roger Hughes, ROGERHUGHES, and I'm the president of Doane University. Doane is a member of the Council of Independent Nebraska Colleges, and I appreciate the opportunity to join you today in support of LB 273. Increasing funding for the Nebraska Opportunity Grant will help in 3 ways. 1, it will make a college education more affordable for more Nebraska students. 2, it will increase student retention. And 3, it will help Nebraska compete economically. According to the data from the Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education, in 2021, 15,000 Nebraska students qualified for the Nebraska Opportunity Grant. However, only 13,000 students actually received awards to a lack of NOG funding. LB 273 can help us close this gap so that we aren't leaving out about 2,000 students who qualify for the NOG funding. The average NOG award is near $2,000, which makes it an important contribution toward a student's college education. Even so, Nebraska was recently ranked 35th in the United States for the amount of state-provided need-based financial aid on a per-student basis. I know you've heard a lot of these statistics before. I think it illustrates the importance of this matter. In front of us, we have the opportunity to do better than 35th by closing this gap. Our students at Doane and other private and public universities and colleges across the state are counting on us to improve access to higher education, especially for our low and middle income families where every dollar counts. I hear directly from our students that the college affordability must be a priority if we seek to make a positive difference in our communities. Increasing financial support for our in-state students by investing in the NOG will also strengthen student retention. And by retention, I not only mean retention to complete their degrees, but I also mean retaining them to join the workforce of Nebraska. Simply put, NOG keeps Nebraska students in Nebraska. We know that financial support helps our students not only enroll, but also to graduate and launch their careers. We know that when students struggle to pay for college, they may be forced to drop out, pause their education until they can raise more money, or take on excessive debt. Financial stresses are real and can negatively affect our students' academics and mental health. We heard from Governor Pillen that our children and our youth are Nebraska's future. LB 273 invests in their education and incentivizes our students to pursue their degrees right here in the state. When we increase access to college education, those degrees improve job opportunities and elevate earning potential. And this leads to increased economic mobility, higher tax revenues, and overall economic development of our state. In meetings with our business partners, I asked them about the number one issue that they face, and repeatedly and resoundingly, they share that attracting talent is the clear barrier to growing their companies. A report from the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce outlines that one way to ensure Nebraska can compete globally is by expanding the funding available for students to earn a college degree, especially those in high demand, high paying like technology. On behalf of Doane University, I want to thank Senator Vargas for bringing this bill forward. And I share my appreciation to the members of the Appropriations Committee as you consider options to invest in our students. They are our future leaders who will make our community strong and enhance the quality of life in this great state. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the committee? Yes.
Just I don't have a perspective here, and I asked the question last time, but if for a student going to Doane, and my son graduated from there, it's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
College. For a student taking the average number of hours, what percentage would the $2,000 paid for of those credit hours?
It depends on their financial aid package because each package is need-based as well as merit-based as well. So when the question was asked previously, how much will $1,700 do? It's stacked on other types of financial aid. So it can be that thing that buys all their books, pays all their lab fees, things like that. So I know I'm not answering your question because each individual situation is different based on their merit scholarship, their academic scholarship, as well as their need-based scholarship.
Okay. I texted my LA in the discussion here to see if there is a study, but where would I access the information that would allow me to see obviously there's no standard student, there's no family income, there's many situations, but I'd like to see, is there a study out there somewhere where I can see the stacking of grants and those kind of things to get an idea of how that everything's stacked them so they can pay for their schooling.
Well, the best form of data is from iPads, but the trouble is in education that's 2 years old. But I'd be happy to put together what I could find for you. We can have an offline conversation about what you're looking for, and I'll find those things for you to help you find that information.
Yeah, it's hard to look at one little piece, and I'm sure it's good, but if I could see the larger piece, that would be beneficial, I think.
Well, and you had brought up something, should we be looking at maybe increasing other scholarships? Iowa, South Dakota, and Kansas all provide supplemental state aid for kids from those states who stay in that state to go to school. And a recent study by Professor Goss indicated that those who go to the small privates in Nebraska stay in Nebraska at a much higher rate. So I think it's a great investment for this committee to consider in the future of our students.
Yeah, I would appreciate that information.
Yes, I'd be happy to. And I appreciate the fact with Darren Good sitting back here, the president of Wesleyan, you tell me how great Doane is. I love it.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Other proponents for LB 273, welcome.
Chair Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee, good afternoon, happy Friday. And first of all, thank you so much for your service and the truly important work that you do for this state. My name is Darren Good, spelled D-A-R-R-I-N-G-O-O-D. I'm the president of Nebraska Wesleyan. But also my comments today reflect the support of the Council of Independent Colleges, which is an organization comprised of all 13 independent post-secondary institutions in the state. Love to go off script a little bit because Senator Vargas' comments really resonated deeply with me. Like him, I was a Pell eligible student, came from a low-income family. One of my grandparents, only one graduated from college. And so Pell grants and the equivalent of the NOG grant were essential for me, as well as working on farms in the summers and loading trucks at UPS at nights put me through college. And so this support is really personal for me. So I'm pleased to testify today to support LB 273 and thank Senator Vargas for introducing this critical piece of legislation. If passed, LB 273 will increase the annual appropriation from the Nebraska Legislature by $7.5 million annually for the Nebraska Opportunity Grant Program, or NOG. The Nebraska Opportunity Grant Program is state of Nebraska's only need-based financial aid program for post-secondary students and provides crucial financial assistance to those who are struggling to pay for the significant and increasing costs associated with attending college, such as tuition, books, and room and board. According to Nebraska's Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education, the average Nebraska Opportunity Grant recipient was awarded only $1,721 during the 2021-2022 cycle. However, I would argue that disguises the fact that, as we've heard already today, most qualified students did not receive any NOG funds. At Nebraska Wesleyan, we're greatly appreciative of the assistance that is provided to our students through the Nebraska Opportunity Grant Program, as a considerable portion are eligible of our students are for this funding. After all, over 80% of NWU students are from Nebraska, and over a quarter, close to 30% in any given year, are Pell eligible. I should note a higher percentage than at UNL are Pell eligible. Despite the fact that many NWU students remain eligible for NOG funding, only a portion actually receive this assistance. This problem, as we've heard, exists at other colleges and universities across the state, as the student need for these funds far exceeds available funding provided by the state of Nebraska at this time. In 2021-22 alone, roughly 13,000 students received NOG awards, but an even greater number, over 15,000 qualified students, did not receive any NOG funding. These are students from your districts and from districts throughout this state who are from low or middle income families. LB 273 will greatly assist in bridging the substantial gap in coverage under the Nebraska Opportunity Grant Program and has the potential to help increase the total NOG amount provided to each respective student as well. Amid a time of rising costs, every increase in NOG assistance can make a meaningful difference for Nebraska students who are hard-pressed to make ends meet while completing their post-secondary education program. While Nebraska may lag behind many states in terms of per-student funding for post-secondary education, including, as one example, our neighboring Iowa, where eligible students can receive up to $7,500 through Iowa Tuition Grant. We greatly appreciate the foresight of the Nebraska Legislature in creating Nebraska Opportunity Grants to minimize this disparity, and applaud the Appropriations Committee for considering LB 273, which will make us even more competitive. As the president of Nebraska Wesleyan, I have the great privilege to travel throughout this beautiful, diverse state to engage with prospective students and their families. Through my interactions, I have met countless bright, young Nebraskans who are destined to make meaningful impacts in our communities, as long as, that is, we can retain them and prevent them from leaving for opportunities elsewhere. Through making post-secondary education more accessible and affordable in Nebraska, we can take a solid step forward in our collective retention efforts. LB 273 does exactly that. As Governor Pillen has often stated, Our youth is our future, and we need to invest in them through LB 273 because those who attend a Nebraska college or university are far more likely to remain in Nebraska than if they choose an out-of-state school. And off script, as Dr. Armendariz stated, we want a better success rate for Nebraska taxpayer investment. Nebraska Wesleyan graduates, as one example, have a higher percentage of students graduate on time in 4 years than any school except Creighton. I had somebody crunch the numbers, and we actually calculated what percentage of our students who are enrolled full-time for 8 semesters graduate on time in 4 years. 88%. And that's during COVID years when many students fell behind. So we are a great investment. So in spite of the fact that we have a higher percentage of Pell eligible students than many of the other schools, we are a great investment, as are other independent colleges. So for this reason, Nebraska Wesleyan and the Council of Independent Nebraska Colleges are enthusiastically in support of LB 273 and respectfully request that the Appropriations Committee advance this bill. Thank you for your consideration.
Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none? Oh, there is.
Sorry, one second. Since you brought it up, one, not doctor, for sure. Do you have any special programs designed for these grant eligible students to be successful and to actually graduate?
Yeah, we have an enormous amount of investment in student success programs. We have personal advising by faculty who act as advisors to the students rather than professional advisors. So they see them in class and they advise them, but they also have student peers that help advise them and a support center for academic support. Financially, we also do a lot. In fact, we made the decision for next fall that every Pell eligible student at Nebraska Wesleyan will pay zero tuition. We're going to find a way to fill the gap. And so this sort of support helps us provide that kind of support for the highly needy students so that they hopefully don't have to work 30 hours a week while they go to college full time.
I appreciate that. That's part of the problem. And then the programming while they're there to keep them there.
Exactly.
Combined.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Other questions from the committee? I had just one question. You said you're representing the 13 private colleges. How is enrollment doing among your, is it going up?
No, I'd say nationwide enrollments has struggled. And so we, I think, are facing those enrollment headwinds. All but the very elite schools around the country are struggling to make their enrollment goals. And so I think we're all facing that same sort of struggle and finding ways to try to balance that budget gap that as we try to meet that enrollment.
Yep, that's what we have seen with other institutions. All right, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you all.
Are there any other proponents for LB 273? Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Jacob Drake, Jacobdrake, and I'm honored to serve as the Student Body President and Student Regent for the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm pleased to be here today on behalf of the University of Nebraska system in support of LB 273, a proposal that increases the annual state funding for the Nebraska Opportunity Program, or NOG. It's the state's only need-based financial aid program that provides state financial aid assistance to qualified low-income Nebraska residents to attend the college of their choice in Nebraska. I grew up in the small town of Murray, Nebraska, in the heart of Chairman Clements' district. I'm a first-generation college student whose mother did not have the opportunity to attend college and whose father chose to enter a trade. As education costs continue to rise nationally, it has only become more difficult for students like me to pursue a college degree. The University of Nebraska system is an institution that strives to provide access to a high-quality, affordable education. From establishing the Nebraska Promise, which waives tuition for students with family incomes less than $65,000, to the recent 2-year tuition freeze through the fiscal year, the NU system is committed to the mission of being accessible to all Nebraskans. However, there is still a significant amount of need among our student population. According to the CCPE, in 2022, almost 6,000 NU system students, or 46% of the total awardees, received support from NOG. An additional 5,000 NU students qualified for support, but could not receive an award due to lack of funding. That means that almost 50% of NU students who qualify for this critical assistance did not receive funding. This data reinforces the need for additional need-based funding for students, and I feel confident in representing the student body when I say that financial need should not be a barrier to pursuing higher education. On behalf of the University of Nebraska system, our nearly 50,000 students, and especially on behalf of our NOG recipients, I want to thank Senator Vargas for introducing LB 273. Given growing workforce strains across the state, we urge the legislature to continue to invest in student success, and expanding funding towards the NOG would bolster the state's commitment to making higher education accessible to Nebraska students and families. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you. Congratulations on being student president and regent, and thank you for representing District 2. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, congratulations and best wishes to you. Thank you. Mr. Drake, were you a page?
Yes, I was.
Oh, very good. Thank you for serving the legislature. Welcome. Next proponent.
Good afternoon, Senator Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Leah Barrett, Leah Barrett, and today I'm representing the community colleges that are part of the Nebraska Community College Association. And I would share with you that we are, like the individuals who spoke before me, that maybe are no longer in the room, we are proponents of supporting the additional investment, and we appreciate Senator Vargas's bill to increase the appropriation for the Nebraska Opportunity Scholarship. I would say I'm not going to use much of your time because what has been said by my colleagues that are presidents as well as our student body president from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln is true for us as well. This is an important program that really does support our students that have financial need. And so we would appreciate your continued support.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Other proponents for LB 273, step forward.
Good afternoon again, Chairman
Welcome.
Clements, members
Members
of the committee. My name is Mike Baumgartner, Mikebaumgartner. I'm the Executive Director of the Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education. Given my previous testimony this afternoon, I'm sure it is no surprise to you that I am supporting LB 273 introduced by Senator Vargas. I'm not going to go through the minutiae of the program again. I think it's been very well covered by everybody who has spoken on behalf of the program already. I will make sure that Ms. Holden gets these to all of you. Sorry I did not hand that out today. This is a more extensive version of the report that we have there. In fact, I might just leave it to you to make copies if you'd like. Or
you can leave it with our clerk.
Okay. And also we have, as required by statute, every 2 years, we do the tuition fees and college affordability report that is filed with the legislature. But it gets to some of the questions about how aid is stacked. It is oriented toward the colleges, to the state colleges, universities, and community colleges. But I will get copies of that too, and I will print that and send it over because that's a lot of printing. But I think that'll help you understand as well how the different pieces of financial aid fit together, how Nebraska compares, how our tuition and fees compare, and how affordability breaks down by different income levels at the different institutions. So
Or an electronic copy to our clerk would be
we'll do
sufficient
that.
as
Okay.
well.
Okay.
Yes.
Again, support Senator Vargas. Thank him for bringing it to you.
Any
And
questions from the committee? What is, I did have one.
Okay.
This is seeking to add 7.5 million. What is the current, what has been the current funding per year?
for the current year, it is $24.9 million. And that has gone up a little each year.
Fiscal year 23 is 24.
Yes, 24.9 million.
Very good. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, and thank you for that information. Are there additional proponents on LB 273? Seeing none, are there any opponents regarding LB 273? Seeing none, is there anyone here in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, Senator Vargas, you're welcome to close.
Thank you, Chairperson Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. The committee I've served on for the past 6 years, I just want to thank all the testifiers. I think what you're hearing and why this is not only personal to me is this is a program that works. This is public and private and independent institutions, it's community colleges, and it represents the full gamut of need for students across our state. And I think what we heard from one testifier is that Iowa is just providing more state-based grant funding, and that just can't stand, right? We have to do something about that. But the truth of the matter is, when we're talking about competitiveness and we're talking about what it's going to take for maintaining and retaining individuals and getting them into the workforce, we have really wonderful students graduating every single year that are making their decisions on where to go. And if there are more well-rounded financial aid packages in other states around us, and I can tell you we are not as competitive where we should be in the Midwest and across the country. We're still at the 35th, 34th. That still means there's 30 plus states that are providing more on average per student and are doing more than we are. It means that they're going to make decisions to not necessarily stay here. And the more that we can do to dramatically increase that college or higher education affordability, all the different types of education that we just heard is really, really important. And the last thing I'll say is on workforce. For those that have been on the committee for some time, we have consistently heard our need. It's one of the reasons why we funded dual enrollment, the reasons why we funded internships, the reasons why we focused on Small Business Innovation Act, the reason why we focused on the shovel-ready projects. Like these were all done because we believe in workforce, but we haven't done a good enough job in really addressing this gap. And what we heard is that there are students that are not receiving anything in terms of state-based aid. And we can address this year, in a year where we really need to. And the last thing I'll sort of technically address is, and I think you heard this from the director, we have also cash lottery funds that are attributed to this as well. And there will be a time where those lottery funds that are being expended right now we're going to be having too many lottery funds made available to this, and it's going to draw down, and we're going to have to address it. So this is also getting ahead of general funds doing more of the lifting in this program, because it's not sustainable on its own. I think the number he said is 2027. We're going to have to revisit it, which means I'm not going to be here, and said Chairman Clements and most of the committee, except maybe a few of you, are going to be here to address that. So we need to do something, and we need to do it quickly. And so I appreciate your help. I hope we can include this in the budget, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Senator Vargas. And we have position comments. I have 3 proponents, no opponents, no neutral on LB 273. That will conclude the hearing on LB 273. We will now open the hearing for LB 373, Senator Merman.
Good afternoon, Senator Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Senator Dave Merman, D-A-V-E-M-U-R-M-A-N. I'm here to introduce LB 373, which would appropriate $300,000 in fiscal year 2023-24 and fiscal year 24-25 to the Nebraska Agri-Ability Program.
Additionally, I've filed an amendment that corrects the agency to which this money will be appropriated. When we initially made this bill, the intention was to run the grant through the University of Nebraska. I'm pleased to say that the Department of Agriculture has taken on this grant, and it has also been included as part of the governor's preliminary budget in LB 814. You will hear some stories today from several folks who have benefited from this program, which was part of our previous budget passed in 2021. At its core, this program is about assisting the hardest working people in our state, farmers. In this case, farmers with a disability. This program has provided farmers with the dignity of being able to take care of their land or animals. This is a critical program. The stories you will hear following this open are touching and speak to the importance of this legislation. I am very appreciative for the committee's consideration of this bill as part of the budget, and I'm grateful to the governor including this as part of LB 814. Again, I ask you to advance this bill and welcome any questions, but others behind me may be better equipped to answer any questions you might have.
And Senator Wishart.
Thank you, Senator Clemens, and thank you, Senator Merman. I remember last time you brought this legislation, I thought it was one of the best hearings that we'd had in front of us. So I'm glad to see you back. Just want to clarify, previously the Appropriations Committee supported $300,000. Are you asking to increase that to $600,000? Can you walk us through what your intent is for the full funding for this legislation?
Well, I think others behind me might be able to answer it better, but I think it's just the 300,000 that was appropriated previously.
Okay, and then that's continued funding, so 300,000 per year.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's what the fiscal agencies do. Are there any other questions? Seeing none. Welcome proponents regarding LB 373. Please come forward.
Good afternoon, Senator Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Emily Jacobson, EMILY-JACOBSON. I am here today in support of LB 373. I am the Nebraska Agribility Program Manager, but I also speak to you today as a Nebraska citizen and lifelong member of Nebraska's agricultural community. I currently live in Petersburg, Nebraska, which is in Boone County, but my husband and I's agricultural roots are in Madison County, where we both grew up and continue to be active in our agricultural world. I graduated with my master's degree in occupational therapy. Having grown up on a farm in Northeast Nebraska, I was passionate about agriculture as well as safe farm practices and wanted to be able to tie my passions together. For the past 8 years, I have worked for Easter Seals, Nebraska with the Nebraska Agribility Program as the lead rural rehabilitation specialist, recently taking over as program manager. This passion is tied together by keeping secondary injuries at bay by recommending assistive technology to overcome disabilities, injury limitations, and allowing clients to continue doing what they love every day. Agribility is a program of the USDA and is a part of the Farm Bill Ag Safety Section. Its sole purpose is to serve farmers and ranchers with disabilities. The national agribility budget is a little over $4.2 million. That money funds program operations in 20 states nationally and the National Agribility Project that is currently hosted by Purdue University. National Agribility is responsible for the coordination of the state projects and our training. It is important to note that no assistive technology is funded with that grant money. It is a requirement for the Agribility USDA grant that funding for operations be distributed through land-grant universities and that each state cooperate with a disability-based organization to operate the program services. Here in Nebraska, our partners are UNL Extension and Easter Seals, Nebraska, a subsidiary of the Visiting Nurse Association in Omaha. The direct on-farm assessments and services are currently provided by statewide by Easter Seals staff. The assessment of the needs of a farmer or rancher is based on their individual disability and limitations. Assistive technology recommendations are made on what equipment is required to safely continue their work. Items such as person lifts for implements, modification to implement controls and shop doors, pasture and feedlot gates, shop tools, driving controls for pickups and utility vehicles for outdoor mobility. In some cases, the farmer or rancher provides his or her own funding, but in most cases, supplemental funding is required. Agribility has a contract with the State of Nebraska Vocational Rehabilitation Services, or VR, to provide them with an assessment and recommendations. VR has been the primary funder of this assistive technology since the program's inception in 1995. Since 1995, Agribility has served nearly 630 clients in every county in the state except Douglas County. In 2021, Nebraska Agribility sought out funding for clients that were unfunded through the Nebraska Vocational Rehabilitation System. We received funding from the Nebraska Legislature for 2 years at $300,000 per year. For our FY 21-22, the Ag AT Fund served 15 clients totaling over $294,000. The carryover was put towards 22-23 funds. So far in this fiscal year, we have served 6 clients with 1 additional current pending paperwork for a total of $120,312. There are at least 6 more clients that will potentially utilize these funds in the near future. To date, these funds have kept 21 farmers and ranchers actively engaged in their livelihood, which is priceless. This program has been creating hope, increasing independence, as well as improving the health and quality of life of farmers and ranchers in Nebraska. In addition, grant recipients are monetarily contributing to their community and state economy through increased purchases and taxes paid. There's a formalized application process for the Ag AT Fund, which includes a minimum 5% grantee investment in proposed items projects. Many participants have opted to contribute at a higher cost share. The average cost share in FY 21-22 was 15%. Funds are requested from the Department of Agriculture 5 times in the year 1, November, January, March, and twice in June. The Department of Ag initially asked that we batch request as much as possible, but it became very difficult to wait on requesting funds after approval due to supply and demand issues with a lot of our vendors. With each invoice to the Department of Ag, Easter Seals Nebraska provides a client number, description of items, price quotes, grant funding amount, and county information. I have submitted the same information for year 1 or for FY 2021-22 with my testimony. We also provide an annual report to the Department of Ag that included proof that the checks were cashed.
Your time is up. If you would close.
Yep.
Wrap it up.
Absolutely. We continue to see a need for assistive technology for farmers and ranchers with disabilities, and we will continue to look forward to matching grants and organizations such as Farm Rescue to supplement funding. I will note that there were stories handed out for you guys. Those stories are of clients that were served with the Ag AT Fund. There's also a copy of the application process for you as well. So I thank you for the opportunity to comment on this proposal, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there other proponents for LB 373? Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Aaron Bach from Beatrice, Nebraska. I am here today in support of LB 373.
Could you spell your name for us?
Again, my name is Aaron Bach, Aaron Bock. And as a stroke survivor, I encounter limitations daily. I suffer from a right-sided weakness, which does not leave me completely disabled. I do not like to use that word very often because I'm not disabled. I do not like to use that, like I say, but I do have a disability that does not make daily routine more difficult. I can typically get most jobs completed, but usually with more effort and time than without my disability. Because of past financial help and planning through AgriAbility, my workload is lessened considerably. AgriAbility funding made it possible for us to have a hydraulic cattle working facility, along with gates, latches, and various tools for me to use in my daily routine. Most recently, I'm getting off my script here, but most recently, AgriAbility has also helped to fund a hydraulic door for myself to use on a machine shed that I cannot use properly right now just because of heavy doors and sliding it back open and shut. So I feel this program is very helpful for farmers as myself who might need assistance that they otherwise could not afford. A lot of this is very, very expensive stuff. Obviously, you all know that. I feel it is very important to keep every young farmer and rancher in this business as much as we can. We need every farmer that we can and as productive as we can keep them in the business. So thank you so much for this opportunity to comment on this very important legislation. And we do very much appreciate what you do for support and everything like that. I'm happy to answer any questions now. If you can't think of anything, I have my contact info on the bottom there, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have right now.
Other questions from the committee? I was wondering, how did you find out about the AgriAbility program? We found out about this due to it was actually through the college down there at Beatrice. We kind of started the process there, and then they directed us through the Easter Seals of Nebraska, and then came out and assessed, and we got funding. And they handed us out the application form. Did you find the process easy to handle?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Very much so.
Very good. Other questions from the committee? Thank you for your testimony.
Yes, thank you.
Other proponents for LB 373? Welcome.
Senator Clements and members of the Appropriation Committee, thank you for having me today. My name is William Meyer, WILLIAM MEYER. I'm here today in support of LB 373. I'm a client of the AgriAbility program, and I have a T4 spinal cord injury, which means I have no feeling from the mid-chest down. Not having the use of my lower extremities, I thought I would never get back to working on my family farm and ranch, which I've been doing since I was a young child. But that all changed the day that Rod Peterson came and told me about the AgriAbility program. Not only did this program show me that other people with my injury are successfully and independently farming today, but they also helped me pay for some of the equipment that I use every day to get back to work. Because of the AgriAbility program, I wake up every morning with a job to do and a purpose to get out of bed. Cattle eat every day, and that is one of the many jobs that I do around my farm. The special equipment that the AgriAbility program helped me get, and the main piece of equipment that I have, is a man lift that is mounted on the back of my pickup bed. This lift gets me into my pickup and allows me to drive to any piece of equipment, a tractor, feed truck, even a lawnmower, and get in them and operate them completely independently. Depending on the time of year, you will find me in a feed truck feeding cattle at the feed yard. In the fall, operating a grain cart, helping pick corn. In the summer, in the swather, mowing alfalfa. But not only do I get to operate equipment around the farm, I also help ranch with the saddle that AgriBelly helped me get. This allows me to help move cattle and bring calves in the spring. There are a few other pieces of equipment that I have, but these are the main ones. Because of these pieces of equipment are so specialized, not only are they hard to find, but also expensive. Without the AgriBelly program, I would not be able to afford half the equipment that I have, and probably would not be doing half the labor that I do around the farm today, or farming at all. This program has not only given me a purpose to get up every day, but also makes me feel like a productive member of society, and for that, I am grateful. I'm here to take any questions at this time.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Lippincott.
If you would have had to pay out of pocket for all this equipment that you have, what would that have been?
To this day, originally we started with like $70,000 worth of equipment, and I think I have about $140,000 worth of equipment today that I use almost every day.
And where do you live?
Palmer, Nebraska.
All right.
Just north of Grand Island, about 30 miles.
All right. And did I hear you say you have equipment to get into the saddle?
Yeah, it was a lift that's on my pickup that I use to get in the equipment. I also use that to get on my horse. And then they also got me a saddle that's specialized, and it has support to my upper extremities, so I don't need my legs I can still ride a horse.
Riding a horse. That's great to hear.
That's something I never thought I'd never do again after my accident.
Other questions? Thank you for coming. Thank you for your testimony. Other proponents for LB 373. Welcome.
Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee, my name is Tanya Meyer, Tanyameyer. I am here today in support of LB 373. By the way, this is my son, William, of which we're very proud of his determination. And also to let you know, this next week is 8 years anniversary of his accident, March 7th. My son is a client of AgriBelly. He is a T4 paraplegic, meaning that he has no muscle control below his waist. Without the AgriBelly program, we or the staff at Madonna would never have any idea where to start to get William back in the saddle, the truck, the tractor to continue farming as he does today, or the resources to afford all the equipment necessary for that to be possible, for which his family and I are extremely grateful. Not only did this program get him back to work in the field of his choice that he loves and is passionate about, they also helped him remodel his home to be handicap accessible so that he can live independently. Within days of William's accident, AgriBelly program was contacted about a potential client that everyone knew to love farming and ranching. It is in his blood from generations back. Farming is not an easy career choice. It requires passion, determination, and perseverance to get the job done daily. William has that drive. He was a recent graduate of the Ag program at CCC in Beatrice and had been working at Central Valley Ag as a crop scout technician and farmed with his grandfather. The time he spent in rehab at Madonna and in physical therapy gave him tools to move around, but not to work in the industry that makes him thrive. The people at AgriBelly have years of experience in putting farmers back to work and the connections to know where those resources are. Something I would have never dreamed we would ever need to know and would have taken us forever to figure out. William has a scissor lift mounted on his pickup that extends 16 feet into the air that gets him into any truck, tractor, piece of equipment that has hand controls. Today, he is willing and able to feed cattle, windrow, rake and bale hay, fertilize pastures, alfalfa and cornfields, shear trees. The list is endless because of the tools and equipment and knowledge provided through this program. Can you imagine if without AgriBelly program, William might have been dependent on state and federal funds for income for the rest of his life? Instead, because of AgriBelly, He is a productive member of the taxpayers of our community. For every dollar invested into this program, it has been greatly rewarded and tracks revenue to the government, as well as a sense of well-being for our son. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this proposal, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, I just thank you. I know what a mother's heart's like. And, great to see this success story.
Yeah, thank you
for
very much.
coming.
Thank you.
Other proponents?
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Jay Ferris. That's Jayferris. I serve as the Director of Political Engagement and State Policy for Nebraska Farm Bureau, and today I'm testifying in support of LB 373 on behalf of Nebraska Farm Bureau Federation, the Nebraska Cattlemen, Nebraska Pork Producers Association, Nebraska Soybeans Association, and the Nebraska State Dairy Association. Just give you a little background, about this program and about myself. I've had the personal opportunity to serve on the Nebraska Agribility Advisory Committee since its inception back in the mid-90s. And through that time, I've gotten to witness firsthand many of the success stories, and you've seen a few of those today. And several years ago, one of our members was impacted by this program and came to us and said there's a funding shortage through agribility, through the assistive technology. And so we have direct policy that says we want to support agribility and the funding of the program. And so that's what we're here today. 2 years ago, we were here in front of you and you were gracious enough to put this in the budget through the Department of Agriculture. I have visited with Director Vinton and also Assistant Director Miracle. And so they are aware of the program. Since they're new, I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to surprise them that it was in their budget. They are aware of the program and supportive as well. But mostly I just am here to answer any questions you may have about the program. So thank you, and would like to thank Senator Merman for bringing this forward as well.
Any questions from the committee? I had one question. Does Farm Bureau itself contribute to this program?
Through my time serving on the committee and then also helping get the word out about the program, because, early on, and your question to one of the testifiers before about how did you find out about the program, and that was one of the strong challenges early on with the program. How do you get the word out that this is even available? And the other thing was, as farmers and ranchers, we're independent. We'll do it ourselves. And somebody says, I'm here to help, I'm going to do it myself. And so that was one of the early challenges. But through that time, it's kind of come to be more acceptable, and realizing through many of the rehabilitation programs that are out there, they understand that agribility is there and will refer clients to them as well. But financially, no, we don't do any direct support, but we're there and,
We help get the word out.
we help get the word out and help advise and, work in whatever we can do to support them, yes.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Well, thank you.
Are there other proponents for LB 373? Welcome.
Well, thank you. My name is Eugene Bach, EUGENE BOCK. Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee, I appreciate very much for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. As some of you may already know, Aaron Bach is my son. I had a hard time with this last time too. As we farm and ranch together, I am very familiar with some of the daily chores that are difficult for him. I have also had some recent health issues, back surgery and shoulder operations, which has made some jobs nearly impossible for me as well as for Aaron. Through the help of agribility, we were able to have a hydraulic door installed in a building that we use to store our feeding equipment. The sliding doors on the building were nearly impossible and too heavy for either of us to move. This project has not only helped me, but has also have been a major help for Aaron. I am certain that with the funding, if this program is funded, they will be able to help many others who can be more productive with some assistance, like we also have received. You know, and I just want to thank you for your time and consideration for this program. I feel it's very important. I'm touched with Will's testimony. I feel that he is probably, you know, a major spokesperson for this, that, you know, ought to have a commercial in his behalf. So anyway, I appreciate very much. And if there's any questions, I can.
Any questions? Anyone in the committee like to go 16 feet up in the air with William?
Yeah, it's not a seatbelt.
We have one. Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you.
Any other proponents for LB 373? Seeing none, is there anyone here in opposition? Seeing none, is there anyone here in a neutral capacity? Seeing none, you're welcome to close, Senator.
Well, I've got some trees around the farm. I think I know who I can look up to trim them now. But anyway, I'd appreciate if you guys would include this as part of the governor's bill, and I appreciate you guys doing that, and the governor also. So thanks a lot.
Any questions from the committee? Did you say you have an amendment for us?
Yeah, I think.
Or-
Yeah.
All I have is a green copy.
Yeah. Let's see.
Would you get it to the clerk, please, after the hearing?
Okay.
Seeing no questions, I have no position statements, so we will close the hearing for LB 373.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I missed it. Oh, it's not highlighted on here. I need to briefly reopen 373. There was position comments. There are 8 proponents, no opponents, no neutral on LB 373, and that concludes LB 373. We will now move to LB 802. Senator Vargas, welcome again.
Senator Clements, like that tie. Okay, here we go.
Thank you. You're the second one today.
Oh, yeah? They have good taste. For one of our wonderful pages.
802, the back of the book.
On the back of the book. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Senator Tony Vargas, TONY-VARGAS, and today I am presenting LB 802, a bill that would appropriate an additional $3.2 million from the general fund for FY 2023 to 24 for a total of $5 million for pediatric cancer research at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. The increase in funding through LB 802 will expand pediatric cancer research and treatment across the state of Nebraska and ultimately reduce the disparity between pediatric and adult cancer research funding. Now, it might surprise some people, it normally does, to know that Nebraska has the #1 rate of childhood lymphoma in the country. It is the second highest rate of childhood brain and central nervous system tumors in the country. Cancer is the #1 disease of death by disease for children in America. In Nebraska, cancer is the second leading cause of death for all ages. Nationally, there's a disparity between pediatric and adult cancer research, treatment, and support. Now, pediatric cancer research and treatment typically receives 4% of national cancer research funding. For example, in the past 3 decades, only 6 new drugs have been approved exclusively for childhood cancer. In Nebraska, we are incredibly lucky to be home to the brilliant minds at UNMC. The Pediatric Cancer Research Group is a multidisciplinary team of scientists working to improve the outcomes of children diagnosed with cancer by combining the scientific infrastructure of the University of Nebraska Medical Center and the Fred and Pamela Buffett Cancer Center with the resources and clinical expertise of Children's Hospital and Medical Center. Now, the Pediatric Cancer Research Group, or PCRG, is the Pediatric Cancer CHRI area of emphasis, and its area of efforts include epidemiology and prevention, including extensive research into water quality as it relates to pediatric cancer rates in Nebraska and other rural areas, pathology of different cancer tumors, innovative treatments with collaborators from pharmaceutical sciences, and increased infrastructure to conduct clinical trials, including augmenting data management, quality of care research, such as the use of robotics and virtual reality to improve the experiences in physical therapy or decrease the need for sedation in radiology, oncology, and imaging. Survivorship research in partnership with Children's Hospital and Medical Center Survivorship Clinic, developing resources and tools to benefit a wide range of cancer research, including animal models and tumor banks, and training for the next generation of researchers through fellowships and laboratory experiences. Now, all this work that I just described is incredibly critical to improving outcomes for children who are diagnosed with cancer in Nebraska. And that is happening in our own backyard. There are a lot of really incredible people who are sitting behind me who will hear from, that you will hear from next. You're going to hear from families, physicians, advocates, and experts on why LB 802 is important and can change lives for not only our young people who face these challenges, but their loved ones as well. Thank you for your attention to this important issue, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have, but I think you'll probably get some of these answers, these questions answered from the testifiers after me. And just want to thank you because, and just for clarification, this is, we already are providing funding towards this. So this is increasing the funding that we already are providing towards this. It's an additional 3.2 million. So it's not an additional 5 million. It's building on the 1.8 that already exists in our budget and has been for years. And this is our opportunity to decrease that gap that currently exists. Thank you.
Question, Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you for bringing this bill, but I guess that's part of my question, the clarification on it, because in your, the handout you had, it would add an additional 3,200. So we already are appropriating 3.2 million. We're already in the current budget, we would already do 1.8, or where does that line up, I guess?
We currently appropriate 1.8, and we have been appropriating 1.8. This would be increasing the appropriation to 3.2 for a total of 5 million in funding. Knowing that we have not, we've not touched this, we've not invested more resources into this, and it is lagging in terms of our funding that we do provide to cancer research from the state. And clearly being number 1 or number 2 in some of the leading areas for childhood cancer, there's a reason to then close that gap.
And then I guess one question, and I apologize if this isn't the right question. Healthcare cash fund, has there ever been any discussion of using that for this? And I know we're very protective of that healthcare cash fund. Currently, the money doesn't come out of there. No.
I'm not asking for that from this, but it's a conversation I'm willing to have. I understand that we try to look at all different types of funds that are available.
All right. Other questions? Seeing none, we'll welcome proponents for LB 802. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Elena Wilson, ALAYNA-WILSON. Last bill of the day. Thank you for hanging in here. I'm sure it's been a very long day for all of you. So I get to serve as a Nebraska ambassador for the Childhood for the American Childhood Cancer Organization, and I get to be the Nebraska representative, but also serve as Miss Douglas County this year. I'm here today as a proponent for Legislative Bill 802. Legislative Bill 802 is sponsored by the American Childhood Cancer Organization to increase funding for pediatric cancer research and resources in Nebraska. The $5 million one-time fiscal fund allocated by this bill will be utilized by the Board of Regents at the University of Nebraska Medical Center to further their efforts and find a cure for this devastating disease that has taken far too many children from us. The first time I had a close encounter with childhood cancer was when one of my dance partners growing up, Trevor Lucky, had been diagnosed. He was diagnosed with leukemia right after his 15th birthday. And I got the call and I was like, well, kids don't die from cancer. I've never heard of a kid dying from cancer, so this isn't going to be a big deal, right? Well, I really wish that were true. Because less than a year after his diagnosis, he went to dance with the angels. Trevor was a perfect example of a child in our community that pediatric cancer took away from us. Here are a few bone-chilling statistics that we, as a community, as Nebraskans, can hopefully change by the passing of this bill. Nebraska is the highest incident rate throughout the entire Midwest for pediatric cancer. And it's the leading cause of death by disease in the entire United States. 1 out of every 6 children will not survive 5 years past their diagnosis date. There are only 6 drugs that are FDA approved that have been specifically designated to treat pediatric cancer, compared to the over 200 approved for adult cancer treatment. Because of this, children end up having to use adult cancer chemotherapies or drugs. You wouldn't give a child Tylenol that was meant for an adult, so why would you give a child chemotherapy that was meant for an adult? This is because there are no other options. Sadly, these drugs leave negative long-term effects on children and often lead to secondary cancers later in their lives. This bill would provide expanded support to help survivors live with these chronic health issues. Pediatric cancer patients and their families living in rural Nebraska are at a significant risk for additional complications. While living in these remote areas, some families may be forced to move closer to Omaha or relocate out of our state, where treatment and rehab can be conducted. It often forces one parent to be with the sick child while the other parent stays at home with the rest of their family. This not only takes a toll on the parents, but imagine fighting for your life and you cannot see one of your parents for months at a time. We, as Nebraskans, need to do better for our community. This is why we need Legislative Bill 802 to be approved so that $5 million can be expanded into the incredible research that is being done in our home state to help families that are facing the darkest parts of their lives. I am here because this deadly, awful disease took one of my best friends from me. Don't let it take someone from your life too. Thank you for your consideration of LB 802, and I would love to answer any questions.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. We'll take the next proponent for LB 802.
Hi, I'm Ashton Schwartz, ASHTYN, SCHWARTZ, and I'm from Scottsbluff, Nebraska. I'm here to share my story and the importance of raising awareness and to increase funding for LB 802 at the next state level for pediatric cancer research, build out resources, formulate better data collecting, and to expand the incredible work that is continuously being done in our state. On September 27, 2008, at the young age of 3, I was one of 47 kids in the U.S. that day whose parents were told their child had cancer. At the time, I had no idea the impact this had on me and my family, but I do now. There's no medical treatment center in my rural community. I initially was life-flighted to Denver, Colorado, where my 3-year treatment protocol started. I spent 28 straight days in the hospital with daily pokes and infusions in efforts to achieve remission. About 6 months into treatment while traveling home, I had a delayed reaction to a highly potent chemotherapy. My mom had to overdose me with Benadryl to stop the anaphylactic shock I was experiencing until my parents could get me to our local hospital that was still an hour away. My mom still struggles with the fear of almost losing me that evening. Today, our oncologist says it was one of her scariest phone call conversations, having to remain calm on the phone, knowing fully what was happening and the severity of the situation. I am now 17 years old and never imagined I would be invited to speak to you today. I do believe that you are helping me serve a much bigger purpose. You see, my high school basketball team is competing this weekend in the state basketball tournament. And ironically, at the same time, I am here sharing my testimony in front of you. Basketball has been a love of mine since I can remember, and I expected to be competing with them this weekend. God had bigger plans for me, as I have realized my story is meant to impact others and bring deeper meaning to my childhood cancer and why it has influenced my life. The Appropriation Committee can bring even more clarity to my cancer journey by providing the necessary funding to support the Nebraska childhood cancer community. Nebraska loses one child every month to pediatric cancer, so I realize that I am very fortunate to be standing here before you today. I'm a healthy young woman living a normal life, but not all our Nebraska childhood cancer kids are as fortunate as I am. That is why your decision to allocate more funding is crucial in the fight against pediatric cancer. This money will be used to help ensure that more kids like me will live normal lives, which is what they all deserve. An increase to $5 million for LB 802 is crucial to the fight against pediatric cancer for Nebraska, the Midwest, and the rest of the U.S. Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter. It has truly been an honor to be here with you today, and I am open to any questions.
Any questions from the committee? I didn't catch where you're from.
Scottsbluff, Nebraska.
Scottsbluff.
Yep.
Good. The team, the girls' basketball team
Mhm.
competing?
Yep.
Oh, very good. Seeing no questions, thank you for making the trip here. Thank you for your testimony. Next proponent,
Yes, sir.
welcome.
Thank you. My name is Gary Peters. I'm from Aurora, Nebraska. It's G-A-R-Y-P-E-T-E-R-S. And I'm here today representing my son, Jacob Peters, who died fighting cancer on November 16, 2011, at the age of 17. So to touch on something that Elena spoke about is the cancer, the chemo, and the different drugs that have been developed for, or the lack of drugs that have been developed for pediatric cancer patients. Jacob didn't die from cancer. The chemo killed him. The intense chemotherapy that he had to go through to try to get him back into remission caused him multiple organ failure and sepsis. That's what took his life. But it was the fight against cancer that kept going. Jacob's mantra was, you don't have to get sick to get better. That's something that I spent 18 years as a football coach, and I was always looking for that next thing, that next model, that next thing to inspire my team. And Jacob and I came upon that. It was a coach from Montana Tech named Bob Green. And if you've never heard Bob Green's interviews, do yourself a favor and Google Bob Green, Montana Tech. He was once called the most interesting interview in college football. And I love that quote, you don't have to get sick to get better. Jacob wrapped his whole life around that. You know, everything he did, every day he got up, it was, what am I going to do today to get better? Whether it was in the classroom, the athletic field, the weight room, whatever it was, he was going to get better that day. Once he got sick, that just took on a different meaning. Now he's sick. Now he's got cancer. Now we got to find another way to get better. Along the line, I got to hear Andy Means, who used to coach at Millard South, and he had 3 rules for his football teams. Be where you're supposed to be there early, and get better. And I applied that to all of my teams that I coached, and I applied that to my other sons as well. And if you just do those 3 things, your life will probably be pretty good. If you be where you're supposed to be, we're all supposed to be here today. Be early. Everybody was here when I got here, so we were early, because I promise you I was early. The next thing is the hard part, get better. When the original funding for the Pediatric Cancer Research Group came about however many years ago, 10 years ago, that $1.8 million was the first funding spent on pediatric cancer research in the state of Nebraska. So on that day, Nebraska got better. We did something finally to research into treatment options and also the epidemiology. Why? When we touch on, Dr. Thorson said Nebraska has got the 7th highest pediatric cancer rate in the nation. Elena said it was number 1 in the Midwest. Well, the scary thing to me is we're number 7 in the nation, and the other 6 are in the Northeast. We're number 1 west of Pennsylvania. From Pennsylvania to California, we are the #1 incidence rate for pediatric cancer in the nation. So now we haven't done enough. Incidence rates over the last 20 years are still rising. We need to do more in the state of Nebraska to find out why our kids are getting cancer and what we can do to fix that. Once we lost Jacob, I spent a lot of time wondering, now that my other boys are grown, I spent a lot of time wondering where they are and what they're doing. My son Jared is in Nashville. I know where he's at. I know what he's doing. My son Dalton lives here in Lincoln. I know where he's at and what he's doing. But I don't know where Jacob would be since he's not with us anymore. Most days, I have no idea. But today, I know where he is. He's in this room with us. He's here with me. And the reason I know that is he's buried in his football jersey. And he wore number 3. And number 3 has a tremendous meaning to our family because of that reason. And today's the 3rd time that I've spoken to this committee. And we're asking for a little over $3 million in funding. And it's the 3rd day of the 3rd month in the year 2023. So he's here today and he's watching us. Are we going to get better? Are we going to take an opportunity to get, as a state, to get better and to help our kids and the families of our kids fight this deadly disease? So the last thing I want to say is, through the funding to start the Pediatric Cancer Research Group and all of the work, the fantastic work that they have done, one of the things that's come out of that is the Pediatric Cancer Research Symposium. And I believe it's in August, Dr. Coulter, is that correct? Yeah. And Dr. Wishart, or Senator Wishart, that's the second time somebody said doctor, so you guys should feel honored. Senator Wishart and Senator Vargas both took place in a virtual symposium meeting that we had with senators a year or so ago. It was during COVID. But I would like to invite you all to take an opportunity to accept an invitation to come to that symposium and see some of the work that these people are doing. It's an amazing amount of work that they're doing, not only in researching the treatment options, but again, finding out why. We have to do something to stop this. Stop just treating it. Stop it from happening to begin with. So thank you all for your time. We appreciate it. The $1.8 million that was originally allotted has done great things, but we need to get better. We need to increase what we're doing and do a better job. Thank you very much.
Questions from the committee? Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Thank you for being here. How long did your son have cancer?
He survived 290 days. That's it. Most treatment options for pediatric cancer patients are about 3 years. Yeah. From the time that you start to the time that you finish, when you get through the delayed maintenance phase and all the maintenance, there's like 5 steps for most of them. Once you get through it, you're not free of it for 3 years. And so for someone like, Ashton at 3 years old, by the time she was 6, she knew nothing else. Her life was cancer treatment. And she's a huge success story. Look what's happened. I mean, we should get more of that. We should have more of that than more of me. Jacob's story needs to stop.
Other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Additional proponents for LB 802.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clemens and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Dr. Don Coulter, DONCOULTER. I am a clinical pediatric oncologist. I'm a professor of pediatrics at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. And since the Appropriation Committee funded the Pediatric Cancer Research Group, I've been honored to be the director. I'm going to go way off script because I don't think I could do anything close to the proponents that you've heard so far. I want to start by saying I was on Jacob's treatment team. I wish you got a chance to know him, and I wish you could understand how his legacy is honored by his father and his mother, and the advocacy they bring to this. And that's what this is about. This is about honoring the legacy of not only the children who passed pediatric cancer, but also the children who have to survive the intensity of the therapy that they get. We've heard a lot of statistics today. I don't want to repeat them because Senator Vargas did a great job going over all of them. I just want to be very clear. We know that Nebraska has the 7th highest incidence of pediatric cancer in the country. That comes from the CDC. We know that every other state that's in the top 6 or in the Northeast, that statistic has been stable for years. We don't know where pediatric cancer comes from. I can only tell you 2 definitive things that people know. 1, ionizing radiation. We know that from the bombs at Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And number 2, pediatric oncologists. We give cancer because the therapies that we use that you've heard so much about cause secondary cancers. I'm on call right now at the university taking care of patients there. I'm taking care currently of 2 patients who have secondary cancers from the first cancer that they had. Childhood cancer rates have been increasing over the last several decades. That trend is particularly problematic in Nebraska. Nebraska is the 16th largest state in the country, 75,000 square miles. And there is one place that you can come for pediatric cancer care in Nebraska, and it's Omaha. You've heard some data about how that can be incredibly problematic for families. There's good data out there that shows that if you live more than 2 hours away from the center where your child is getting treated, 1/3 of those families lose a job. 1/3 of those families have to move closer to the center. And 1/3 of those kids don't get back to school. We have the highest incidence of pediatric lymphoma. We have one of the highest incidence of pediatric brain tumors, and we have for many years. As Senator Vargas said, the federal government funds pediatric cancer research at a rate of 4%. Pharmaceutical companies also fund a great deal of research in adults. Pharmaceutical companies do not fund research in pediatric patients for a number of reasons, all of which are honestly appropriate. But it's true, there is a massive funding gap for pediatric patients. I'm not from Nebraska. I'm from Canada. I went to medical school in Arizona, did my residency and fellowship in North Carolina, came here, and I'm still in awe of the fact that in 2014, the Nebraska Legislature, and specifically the Committee of Appropriations, decided to do something about this. It gave $1.8 million as one-time funding, $1 for every person in Nebraska, to augment pediatric cancer research, which honestly wasn't happening. It just doesn't happen, and we're not the only ones. It's not a popular focus of research. Breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, all incredibly important and need to be looked at, but are the focus of most research entities. With that 1 year of funding, I was tasked with writing a report that went into the public record. After that report was seen, I was brought back to Appropriations, and the decision was made that we're going to keep doing that $1.8 million every year. And so every year I write a report of the activities of the Pediatric Cancer Research Group that's in the public record. I also have the symposium that Gary invited you to, that I'm still honored that Senator Wishart and Senator Vargas were kind enough to come to and speak to our group to talk about the things that we do. What are the things that we do? Well, clinical studies. You heard about robotic studies. It's a robotic seal that's used for Alzheimer's patients because patients that have cancer are immunosuppressed, and as such, they can't be near pets and therapy animals that can help them through physical therapy. We use a robotic seal because it can be cleaned, and it helps these kids have something to focus on when they're going through physical therapy. It's incredible. Virtual reality. One of the things that the Pediatric Cancer Research Group did is we looked at where our diseases are coming from in Nebraska. That's where some people talk about water quality as a potential causative agent, and I have no facts about that. I'll be 100% honest, but we are researching that deeply. But we did geographic information system mapping to identify what would be a great secondary site to have kids seen so that these families don't have to travel so far, and it's Kearney. But what are the problems with these adult cancer centers taking care of kids in those places? When it comes to something like radiation therapy, a 4-year-old is not going to lay still in a radiator. They're not, and they shouldn't. And so they use virtual reality to make those things easier. They show them through goggles, and every child can work an Xbox machine now, and it works really well. So I know my time is almost over. I really just want to be here to answer any questions you may have about what we've been doing with the money, what we could do with the money in the future. I would point you to those reports every year that are filed to give an idea of that. But I cannot thank you enough for the difference you make for the children and the families in Nebraska. It is the honor of my life to work with them, and we are so supported by the state. Augmenting these funds would allow us to get to the answers that these patients need and allow us to continue to give the hope that these families deserve. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Armendariz.
Thank you. Can you share with us as much as you can why pharmaceutical companies don't try to
Yes.
develop these drugs?
Senator, thank you so much for that question. It's twofold. And again, I want to be very careful what I'm saying. There's no accusation, but if you were going to make a drug, you would probably not make a drug for a population that was only going to be 2% of who would utilize that drug. And that's the truth of pediatric oncology. It is truly a rare event. That's why the epidemiology is so difficult to figure out. That's why there has to be so many resources given to it, because you don't want to go around saying what causes pediatric cancer when it is a rare event without knowing specifically what that is. So if you're going to go through all the processes of developing a drug and all the funding that goes into that and all the costs that pharmaceutical company is going to incur, you would want to make sure that a vast majority of people could take that drug. And that's why there are not a number of drugs that are developed for pediatric cancer. As a matter of fact, that's why university systems are usually the ones that are doing that. We've developed a couple of drugs through the Pediatric Cancer Research Group that are currently in preclinical trials, mouse trials, cell trials. But again, pharmaceutical companies are usually doing research on adult drugs because it's a better way for them to recuperate the cost. The second part, Senator, is that doing pediatric research on pediatric patients is difficult. There is another layer of responsibility for the investigators because those patients can't consent to those studies. So when you're doing early phase research, like phase 1 and phase 2 research, that type of research absolutely has to be required to identify what the maximum dose can be tolerated in a patient. Those studies are incredibly difficult to do on kids because the children can't consent to that type of a study. And there really is no benefit to them in being in that study. So early phase clinical trials are usually supported by university systems and not so much pharmaceutical companies. And that's where a lot of these funding gaps come from.
I appreciate you stating that out loud because I used to call on a physician who had developed a drug, a promising antibiotic type drug for lung cancer. And there was just no money in it. It's a short-term, cheap, pharmaceuticals just don't invest in those types of drugs. So I'm glad that you highlighted what the roadblock is there. And then it also accentuates the need of finding other funding to develop these.
Yeah, if I could, I just want to go back to something that Mr. Peters said. The toxicity of what these drugs do to pediatric patients, I can't describe it to you, and it would be unfair to. There's a patient in the hospital I'm taking care of right now who has a great many side effects from these drugs because they're developed for adult diseases. Well, pediatric diseases are just different. Think about a pediatric patient. They're young, they're growing, they have growth hormones and all these other things that are normal, that make them grow. Well, that's something that a cancer cell looks at as sugar. So all the pediatric diseases are way more aggressive than adult cancers. Adult cancers, you can do surveillance, you can do screening. You can do things for prostate cancer. You can do things for breast cancer. The vast majority of pediatric cancers have absolutely no screening, and they come on like a lightning bolt. Our diseases explode. They don't have sort of a set standard of this is how they march out. And a lot of that is due to the host or the pediatric patient that they're growing in. And so that's why the research is so different. But again, because there's not as much of a reimbursement or a push from pharmaceutical companies, or the numbers are so low, so the federal government's looking at the resources that they have, and they have to put those resources towards the people that are getting the majority of the diseases, these children who don't have a voice, and these families who are watching their child go through this don't have hope. And that's what makes our state so different. And so I'm greatly appreciative of the funding that you've provided.
Senator Dover.
Two questions. One is, so when you're mapping this out, are there geographical areas in Nebraska that have a higher frequency of the cancer? And then my second question would be, if you're looking at population, obviously that would, more people, more cases. Does it seem as though, is there any correlation between that based on population numbers, like Omaha, Lincoln cities, so those two questions, based on population and geography?
Senator Dover, that's a great question, and thank you for bringing it up. First, these numbers that we will tell you that we have the 7th highest incidence in the country, these are age-adjusted, population-based incident rates. So it's equalized for how many people that you have available. For example, there are 1.8 million people in Nebraska. 22% of those are less than 19, and therefore they're available to get pediatric cancer. And Senator Dover, you're exactly right. A good majority of our pediatric cases come from places of population because that's where people are in order to get it. But about a third of our cases come from rural Nebraska. And by rural Nebraska, I'm talking about frontier counties. And in that setting, again, there's a cutoff of about an hour from the pediatric center where a child is being treated, where the vast majority of that care can be applied there. With Nebraska and the breadth of where our children come from, there are patients who have to drive on a weekly basis from 4 or 5 hours away. When we first started mapping, we mapped based on counties, and we did find that there was sort of a differential incidence rate in different counties across the state, and that there were certain states in the rural areas that were maybe overrepresented with cancer, again, population based. So we did sort of normalize it for how many people were there. That's where we started to look at the different things that can cause pediatric cancer. So we talked about radiation, we talked about pediatric oncologists. Really the only things that we know of that could be factors are environmental factors and genetic factors. And the environmental factor is distinctly why pediatric cancer is at such a high rate in the Northeast. The Northeast industrialized before anybody else in the country did. And a lot of those byproducts of industrialization can actually be things that could be considered carcinogens. So when you're thinking about what are potentials, those are things that we wanted to look at that made Nebraska different. Because as you've heard, we're the highest incidence west of Pennsylvania, but we're the highest incidence in the Midwest. And one of the things that makes Nebraska very different is the Ogallala Aquifer. 85% of Nebraska groundwater is supplied by the Ogallala Aquifer. It's the largest aquifer in the world, and it is naturally contaminated with heavy metals like uranium and arsenic. So is it possible that that is interplaying with maybe some other things that could be in the water that we're still researching very, very deeply? Things like nitrate that we know definitively cause adult cancers, but we don't know if we have a causative answer for pediatric patients. But then the question would be, there's such a latency period sometime in pediatric cancer. We don't know if it's a problem with the mom and the dad, if it's a problem with the child, if it's a problem when the child grows. So you would have to have a certain population that would be great to study to understand that. And that population would be a population that stays in those areas for a long period of time. There's no better place to understand that than Nebraska. These people live in these rural communities for generations. So if there truly was anything to the environment, which I don't know that there is, that is answering why some of these counties have a higher incidence over a long period of time, Senator. I'm not talking about 5 years. We did research over 23 years, and those numbers are stable in some of these counties. It would be because these same generations are living there and being exposed to it over and over again. This is something that the Department of Health and Human Services can help us with, and that's also something that we want to work more with. The Department of Health and Human Services has a lot of statistics that at times are slow to get to the experts in epidemiology to be able to utilize them, because that data has to be protected, and I completely understand that. But we think with this increase in funding, we may be able to get to those types of data points that would help us to better understand, are there at-risk populations? And if so, what can we do to ameliorate those risks?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions from the committee? I had one. How many physicians are there in the pediatric center?
It's kind of you to ask. There are 7 of us.
Right.
And we cover 2 hospitals. So we cover Children's Hospital Medical Center, and we cover the University of Nebraska Medical Center. All of us see patients. I am one of the 2 stem cell transplant physicians that are here in Nebraska, and we take care of all pediatric cancer within the state, and we also take care of all the benign hematology in the state. I have the greatest job in the world.
All right. Well, thank you for your passion for kids, and thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Other proponents for LB 802? Welcome.
Welcome. There, thank you. And thank you for sharing that information too, Doctor. My name is Kyle Zart. I'm from here in Lincoln. That's Kylezart. And I want to take that information and make it a little bit more tangible again here. My cancer journey starts when I was 2 months old. I was diagnosed with neuroblastoma. Fortunately for me, we were able to catch it early, and I immediately started receiving treatment at the University of Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha. As I said, I was very lucky. We caught it early. My hospital stay wasn't too prolonged. I went through a couple of rounds of chemotherapy, surgery, and was able to go home several months after. I've also been the witness in my family of a more unfortunate outcome. My cousin, Jenna Saling, was diagnosed with osteosarcoma when she was 12 years old. And she went the full 3 years and ultimately lost her battle to cancer. During her treatment, they tried everything. They traveled to Houston. They went to the medical center. They did everything they could, but ultimately the medication, science, the technology was not up to speed. Some of my most fond memories actually growing up are going to the medical center every year with my mom, who many of you may know as Shelley Zart, who's here often representing the LES. She also submitted written testimony, which I hope you're able to look at. Every year we would go out for my annual checkup, and we would talk with families, kids in the waiting rooms before seeing Dr. Gordon or before seeing or getting my blood drawn. We would make friends, we would talk, we would get to know each other. Then we'd go our separate ways, only for weeks or months later for my mom to come across another obituary. I have an abundance of personal experience with this disease, with pediatric cancer incidences. But I also know that this is something that affects all Nebraskans. This rattles the foundation of people's lives. This rattles relationships. This touches everyone, whether in a direct way or an indirect way. And I hope that this committee advances this legislation. And thank you for Senator Vargas for introducing this as well. That's all I have.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there other proponents for LB 802? Seeing none, is there anyone here speaking in opposition? Seeing none, anyone here in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, Senator, you're welcome to close.
I want to thank you for staying later on a Friday, and for those that came and share their stories, for the physicians, for the families, for the survivors, and for those that have lost loved ones. There's just a few things I wanted to make sure to share on this. One of them is somebody that has probably reached out to you, Jesse Shoemaker. He was a constituent of mine. He believed he emailed you, and I just want to share something that he sent with his story. So he says, I know firsthand the impact of childhood cancer. My daughter, Madeline, was diagnosed with an extremely aggressive brain cancer called DIPG in January of 2015 when she was 7 years old. She died less than a year later on December 10th, 2015 after treatment failed. I had the opportunity to sit down with Jesse in my first couple of years in the legislature, and it was my first education on how the disparity exists, and just hearing his story and realizing that there's something that we have started to do in the state of Nebraska nearly 10 years ago, putting funding in, and that there's clearly more that we need to and can do. And because of these discrepancies with what we're doing with either adult cancer versus childhood cancer, we have an ability to continue to do more. And I just want to thank you because, I have a 4-year-old who's upstairs wondering where I am right now. And one of the hardest things about this and hearing any of these stories is it has to do with children. It has to do with our kids. It has to do with our future. And it is so much harder to hear the stories of individuals that are going through this treatment and having to go through just the pain and suffering. And I know it's something that we can address and we can do more of in dedicated funds from our state. So I thank you. I thank for those that have testified. I thank you for taking the time.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Vargas. And we have position comments for the record. On LB 802, I have 5 proponents, no opponents, and nobody in neutral. That concludes the hearing for LB 802. That concludes Appropriation Committee for today.